under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. Is there anyone else present that plans to record? Okay, great. Okay, so we have a very busy agenda tonight, so we're going to get right to it. So our first item is approval of the minutes from our regular school committee meeting on April 9th.
I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from April 9th, 2019.
Any seconds?
Second.
Second, okay. Any corrections, any comments? Okay, all in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 4-0. Okay. All right, moving on. We have no CHS representatives tonight. They're both busy, so we're on to good news.
Oh, yeah,
already.
we're on to good news.
Right?
Yes, good
Right
news.
away.
So few items of good news. Our student reps are not here today. One is on a wonderful trip in France, a school trip, and the other one has a game tonight. I don't have all the high school pieces, but I have a couple to throw in there. But first of all, we want to congratulate the 7th grade McCarthy Band and 3 CHS band students who earned positions in the John Philip Sousa National Honors Band. And this is the New England region that they're in. It's a prestigious ensemble, and it's going to be at Mechanics Hall. Oh, it's already happened. It was performed at Mechanics Hall last weekend. Also, the Thursdays will be one of a handful of high school ensembles competing on behalf of North America at the International Competition of High School A Cappella in New York City this weekend. We have 114 students that are going to be inducted into the National English Honor Society on May 1st, if you'd like to stop by the high school that evening. And on April 10th, Mr. Richter's civics class, they went for a tour of the State House, and they had lunch with the entire Chelmsford delegation. Did you guys have lunch without me? Was it you, or, well, maybe it's another group of people. I was a little concerned that I missed out on lunch, but that was a nice, we have some pictures that I'm going to send you to that he took. He did a nice job with that. There was a duct taped the Harrington Principal fundraiser that went over very well. I was actually impressed. I didn't know if we were going to have the duct tape to put him up there, but he was up there. And the kids had a blast. It was fun. I have some pictures of that too I'll send for you. And McCarthy celebrated their cause day. I know that at the last school committee meeting, they talked about the causes that the students were going through from one of the other schools, but it happens at our other schools as well. And they did theirs on the Friday before vacation, and it culminated in a student-staff ultimate volleyball game. No one got hurt. It's good staff-wise. Students chose one of 19 different causes for that day. So there was anything from ALS, autism, there was childhood cancer, adult cancers, so there was all different pieces there. And they wore their cause color for that day. And then on that morning announcements for 19 days prior to the cause day, leading up to it, students read facts about each particular cause on the morning announcements for students. And at Center School, they're excited because they successfully completed their ELA MCAS, which everybody else did as well. But they had a celebration dance for their 3rd and 4th graders, so they got to dance it out, which is fun. And I just learned this piece of information, I don't know, 20 minutes ago, Mr. Morris? So Mr. Morris just told me that 64 cockroaches were delivered to the middle schools for a lab. And what did they do again? They hiss? They hiss. So if anyone is interested in a science lab at the middle school,
No, I'm good.
please,
I'm good.
Yeah,
please
I'm
go
out.
there. I was just happy it wasn't cockroaches somewhere else. It was cockroaches for an actual lab. So, and you'll be hearing from Mr. Morris tonight, not about the cockroaches. And that's what we have for good news this evening.
All right, anybody else have anything good news-wise? All right, now we're to our public input part of our meeting. If you'd like to speak to the committee about any of the items on tonight's agenda, please come forward and state your name for the recording secretary. Okay, seeing none. Moving on to new business.
New business. So we do have a lengthy agenda tonight, so we're going to jump right into this. First up, we actually, Police Chief Jim Spinney, who's a good partner with us in the schools and really working to help schools and our community stay as safe as possible, is here this evening just to touch base on some of the updates to the School Resource Officer Program this year. So I'd like to welcome Chief Spinney for a few comments.
Thanks for having me, members of the committee. Good evening. Let me start by saying I'm glad there's not a duct tape the police chief, because if there was, I'd probably never be seen again. Seriously, though, let me start out by saying we had a collaborative training last week that you're probably all aware of at the McCarthy between all first responders in Chelmsford. If there ever was an emergency at any of our schools, all participants took part in the training. And I want to thank Superintendent Lang, the district, the committee, for allowing this training. This was not the case several years ago. maybe the first of its kind was 4 years ago in town. We were able to use the high school. Last year, we used the Parker, and this year, we used the McCarthy. And I'm sure you can all appreciate, there's no substitute for actual locations to train in. Again, it was a collaboration, police department, fire department, Trinity, Greater Lowell EMS, all responding to various types of situations that we would have to go to. And we're just gonna keep doing that, we're gonna get better at it. Again, several years ago, we didn't do that type of training together. That's today's day and age, we're gonna keep moving forward, we're gonna keep improving. But it's important to use the actual buildings. Some officers in Chelmsford aren't from Chelmsford. They don't know the schools, they don't know the buildings, and especially if they work at night, they don't know the opportunity to go in the buildings. So this training is another way to get everybody familiar with the layouts of the buildings and actually being inside. There's no substitute for actually using the structures. So we do appreciate it. Superintendent Lang's been great to facilitate that, and along with Principal McPhee, and it's been great, and we continue to look forward to the partnerships. There's no priority higher in the police department than our partnerships with the schools and the school district. That's really the top thing we're working on. The last few years, we've seen enormous improvement in this town with regards to school safety and school safety protocols. We have over 300 safety cameras in the district. The superintendent, as you're aware, has had a safety audit performed across the entire district. All protocols reviewed. They're improving every year. As you're aware, we implemented Alice last year. Those drills and that training continue. I participated in those drills along with Superintendent Lang, and they've been going well, and that's going to keep improving. We've made, obviously, a lot of strides in the school resource program. Several years ago, we had no officers in any Chelmsford school. So it was my goal back in 2014 to get that program where it needs to be. So I have a little timeline here I just wanted to go through real quick. In 2015, we put a part-time school resource officer in the high school. In 2016, we put a full-time school resource officer in the high school. In 2017, in addition to the high school, we implemented a part-time school resource officer to go between the Parker and the McCarthy. In 2018, we were successful in making that part-time SRO become a full-time SRO. All these positions, I used existing personnel in the police department to do this. But I spoke to the town manager last year when we put the full-time officer in the middle schools, that my goal, and it's his goal too, and it's the superintendent's goal, was to have a school resource officer dedicated to each middle school. But I simply don't have the personnel to do it. I cannot pull anyone else off the patrol division. So the town manager and I agreed that the best course of action was to add a police officer to the police department in Chelmsford. So that is on the FY20 general operating budget. I expect strong support at town meeting. I think it is worth noting that less than a decade ago, we actually had 8 more police officers on this police department than we currently do now. And our calls for service are at least 25% greater than they were 8 years ago. So if we're fortunate enough to get this approved, it'll put the police department at 54 officers, which will allow me to dedicate a full-time police officer for each middle school. I have spoken with Principal McPhee and Principal Parks. They absolutely love the program. The only thing they don't like about it is that they don't have the officer every day. So that's our goal. And I spoke at the Finance Committee meeting last month or so. A lot of people, there's some misunderstandings about what the school resource officers do. And I know I'm speaking to a knowledgeable group here, but just for the public, some people don't know. Obviously, their first concern is the safety and well-being of staff and students. Everybody understands that. But just as important, they participate in the classrooms. They are embedded in the class. They participate in discussion regarding substance abuse and other health issues. The SROs interact with students and staff, fostering two-way information sharing. When trust is formed, students will approach the SROs and let them know if another student is in crisis. And we've actually had this happen. We have had students and staff approach the offices at the high school and the middle school about another student in need. Maybe a student having trouble at home. So Officer Sullivan, who is the middle school resource officer, actually visited a family during the holidays, during the Christmas season, when he found out that that family was having some issues, some financial problems. And through the Police Athletic League, Officer Sullivan got Christmas presents and brought them to that family and tried to make that holiday season a little better. But the primary goal is the two-way sharing. When we have two-way communication with students, you don't get to the point where we've seen some of these issues across our nation. Well, that's the goal. The goal is to communicate and articulate a situation before it gets tragic. So in addition to the officer being there to provide safety, it's also there to provide information and get information about what's going on with the students. Again, and the SROs are on scene immediately if there is a problem. So I've been asked the question, why the middle schools? Why not the elementary schools? In a perfect world, I'd like an officer in every school. I don't think that's realistic in the short term. But why the middle schools? We're seeing issues at that grade level. We're seeing, believe it or not, substance, I wouldn't say abuse, but I'd say substance experimentation we've seen at the middle schools just this year alone. Social media pressures, bullying incidents, and there's mental health problems that start to develop at that age group that, in my opinion, the officer is far more effective and useful in that middle school age category. Again, to provide that assistance, to show the kids at that age that the officers are there to help them, to be a partner, to be the friend, and that would move forward into the high school. So, this is not an anomaly, what I'm looking to do. I have talked to the police chiefs in our region. Barica has 4. Westford has 2, looking for 2 more, I believe. Tingsboro has 3, looking to add a 4th. Tewksbury has 2, looking to add 2 more. And Waltham, I just threw it on there, has 7. So I think we're in a good place now with what the partnerships we've developed and the officers that we have in place. I really believe having both middle schools and the high school covered full-time will put the district in a real good place. So that's going to be my proposal. The town manager supports it, obviously. I think we're going to get a lot of support at town meeting. But I thought it would be helpful, and so did the superintendent, to discuss it today at your meeting. I didn't know if anyone had any questions.
Any questions, any comments?
No, I certainly said this at a previous meeting, I can't reiterate the value that I think that resource officers bring to the schools for all of the reasons that you listed, and so many more. I also think it's worth mentioning that it transcends just the school environment, and it goes into the community as well. So, your resource officers are getting information about things that may be happening in the community that they can be proactive about. Another one that I actually happen to think is very important is I think they serve as role models and opportunities for kids to understand more about the police department and possible career opportunities, which I think is just a nice dividend, as a result of having these the resource officers in the school. I was wondering, given some of the things that you've talked about in terms of what students talk to you about, is if it would be worth maybe having one of the officers attend the wellness committee meetings. They happen about 4 times a year.
No, it's a good idea.
So that, because, they are aware of a lot of these issues, and I think that sometimes the wellness committee, and I think Katie Sims heads that up, right? She might be one even just worth talking to.
Yeah, if that's what if that would be requested, we would certainly like to participate.
Yeah, I was just, it's just a thought, but I know that they're doing a lot of work, and so to coordinate the efforts. I enjoy having the school resource officers come into my classroom when I'm teaching, whether it be social issues that kids are struggling with, or some of the other ones that you listed. One thing I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about is there's recently been some articles, studies that have come out about the effective having these drills on kids. Kind of that secondary trauma effect, and I guess it really depends on more on how it's conducted. I think we do a great job in Chelmsford conducting it, but, there has been a lot more information that is kind of, the pendulum is kind of swinging back the other way. But are we doing too much in this area? Parents are concerned about, the anxiety that some of times these drills and whatnot have, that it creates in kids. I think having the school resource officers there on a regular basis helps to dispel some of that, but I was wondering if you had heard anything about that.
Well, I saw one of the stories where one police department in the school district used some type of imitation firearms that caused some injuries.
That was on the teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we took a lot of painstaking steps, myself and the superintendent and the assistant superintendent and the whole district really, to really craft Chelmsford's program to lean towards really the best, easiest, smoothest delivery of these protocols. I thought the drills were fine. I did not see, there might have been one or two students that needed some extra attention from teachers to help them facilitate some of the drills, but everyone seemed, for the most part, it was really acknowledged, it was accepted as the new norm. I think we owe it to everybody to give skills that could save your life, regardless of the age. And we're not trying to scare anybody, but it's really help the teachers to make decisions, especially with the younger kids. Help the teachers to make the right decisions to give everybody the best chance to stay healthy. The old system, it might have been less traumatic, also very less effective at having a safe outcome from some of these horrific acts. So I would rather deal with some, in my opinion, some minor anxiety issues that we've seen in this district and have people have the skills to evacuate safely than not, because the alternative is to do nothing. And we've seen that nothing equates to a lot of injuries. So again, I think we took the ALICE program, we made some adjustments. We could have, there's any number of ways to deliver the training. I thought we really took a very responsible approach.
We took a long time in kind of setting up our whole system. I think some districts have just adopted a system and basically kind of rushed to implement. We really spent the better part of a year, even just considering which system to go with, putting a lot of the materials together, getting people, staff first of all, comfortable in the system and knowing what the different responses were going to be, and kind of taking baby steps even as we've been implementing the different drills. We did some scenarios this past fall where we might just practice one particular scenario. And, a few weeks or a few months later, we might do a different scenario. So it hasn't been something that, we've really been going at too aggressively, I don't think. I think the videos that we produce that kind of walk staff and students through the different situations has been helpful. I think the language that's being used at the various levels, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, has certainly been age appropriate. I think what's been great for us is having all different staff within the buildings involved. So if it is you've got your building admin, you've got your teachers, your support staff in the classrooms, but you also have, say, your school counselors and psychologists, and they're all involved in the planning and actual operation of these drills. So we are really trying to take into consideration all the different students and different, anxiety is certainly an issue that we see across the board. We're not trying to make it an anxious type event, and I think we've taken steps to kind of go at that slowly.
And I would agree with you. But as I said, I'm, reading more and more articles, as I'm sure you have seen, about the effects of, the drills and whatnot on kids and anxiety levels. And I think it's important that we continue to talk about this so that people understand what our approach is and how we're taking steps to try and, keep that to a minimum, to help kids not be afraid of coming to school or to keep their anxiety levels, as low as we possibly can. But as time has gone on, as I said, there's been more and more information that's coming out, kind of almost I don't want to say backlash, but it's the only word I can think of, to some of these drills and whatnot. So, but I agree. I think we've done a very nice job implementing these, and I think you guys have done a fantastic job.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think that it's good that the anxiety level has gone down. I think the thing is, in an emergency, the anxiety level is incredibly high, so stress training is really important. There's actually a saying about that: you don't rise to the level of the occasion, you sink to the lowest level of your training. We used to use in the military, and I think it's important for kids to know what to do, and it's good that they've kind of released the anxiety during the process, and if it ever does come up, their body will react rather than their brain. But I just want to say, it's been outstanding work. I think the work we've done with the physical security, just the work that you guys done working together. You know, I have kids in the school, and I always say, God forbid. I want you to train as hard as possible and then never have to use it, which is really the ideal situation. So I appreciate it, and kudos to all of you and your officers.
Thank you.
I'd just like to comment this way. First of all, anytime you've come to a PTO meeting or done anything where I've participated in the past, you've always been extremely cooperative, and truly appreciate that. I know personally that my own children feel much more secure knowing that there is an officer at the high school. My question to you would be, the high school is double the size and double the number of students of the middle schools. Would you see in the future a possibility that you might need an extra resource officer there at some point? Don't know that.
Well, that's a good question. I will say they have a lot of their own internal staff directed at that function.
Okay.
Obviously, they're not police officers, but they have dedicated security, full-time people that work with Detective Tyros, so it's almost like they're an extension of her. They have direct communications via radios. So there are more eyes at the high school doing that function than any other school. Obviously, the size is a factor.
That's
Um,
great. That's
Well,
a
I
great
think
thing to know.
I think they're in a good place right now, because like I said, they do have 3 or 4 people that's their main job. So,
That's great. I also wanted to thank the TV folks for helping so much put together the training tapes and so on, which has been tremendous. And then the other thing I wanted to say is I am so glad that you're going to have officers physically at the facility, at each building, who'll know the building well and can also make recommendations about what can be done to improve the safety of the buildings themselves. And that will be tremendous. At the elementary level, I understand what Donna's saying to her comment, because some parents have said the same thing to me, that there is a greater level of anxiety there. I think at the higher grade levels, they're actually glad to know what to do and to be able to be reactive. And if you're aware of that anxiety, then, you can help them through it. But at the elementary level, it's a little more difficult. So if we can always communicate with parents in advance, letting them know the trainings are happening and that it is a training, that will help a lot, because then that communication can happen at home as well.
Right, so I can just add one thing. So the older kids at the high school have really embraced this, to your point.
Yeah.
But just so everybody knows, at the elementary level, we don't ever pretend there's a bad guy. We never simulate an intruder. That's not done, because that would be scary.
Oh, yeah.
The drills are for the teachers to facilitate the kids, in most of the cases, it's almost like a fire drill. That's the direction we're trying to push them into making those decisions, to leave the building.
Okay.
So there's never a bad guy, there's never any fake weapons or anything like that.
Great. Thanks for
So-
making that distinction. Great. Thank you again.
Thanks very much.
I just want to echo, in terms of, thank you for your support and for your willingness to form such a strong partnership with the schools, and for putting this proposal forward. As you said, school resource officers do a lot more than people might think. People might just imagine they're standing in the hall with their arms folded, but, anytime I've gone to the high school and I've seen the kids interact with the SRO there, they're talking to her and letting her know what's going on, and it's great to see that. And I hope that, the rest of the town meeting reps, value this position as much as we will, and that you get strong support from them on next Monday.
Okay, good.
And I just wanted to add one thing, too, is obviously fully support this and all the work that we've been doing together. But what's also interesting is when you're in different schools, I know it's not particularly part of the SRO program, but you have kind of the I don't know if you call them the neighborhood cars or like the regular duty kind of cars in different neighborhoods, always stopping into the school.
Right.
So that even at the elementary school level, you might pull up and there might be a police car there. It's really become nothing to get excited about anymore. It's not really for an emergency response, but the police officer might just be walking from the school, saying hi during lunch. That's really been positive because the neighborhood officers who would be responding, get to know the kids and get to know the layout of the buildings a little bit. And that's been actually helpful as well. So even though we don't have a dedicated SRO in the elementary schools, they're there quite a bit of the time.
Right, so we've encouraged that now, probably going on 5 years. The day shift officers are encouraged every day to go to the schools in their sector. And while they don't go in individual classrooms, they do, they go to the CAF, they'll swing into the office, they'll see the kids out at the recess, and the whole idea, again, we don't want the arrival of the officer to cause anxiety or fear. So we're trying to make them be a normal part of the kid's day.
That's great.
So, and I've gotten a lot of feedback that's gone very well. Some of my police officers that work during the day actually have kids in the schools they visit. So it's really been a nice facilitation of really a friendly environment.
Right. That's great.
All right, well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night. I can watch the Bruins.
I was gonna say you got plenty.
Next up on the agenda this evening is John Morris, John Morris, our science coordinator, continuing our different departments coming in to make presentations on what they're working on over the course of this year. And I know there are some teachers and students as well, but I'll let John introduce them.
There better not be cockroaches in that box.
Wait and see.
All right.
Do not move to the Azores.
Oh, sure.
You guys can slide this, just push some of the chairs out of the way and slide in.
I'm just gonna move the mics on.
Oh, okay, I could do that.
So, thank you very much for having us come here. Dr. Lang, Dr. Hirsch, school committee. Very excited to be here to talk about science. I know you've heard quite a bit about science this year through various school committee meetings. My name is John Morris. I am the K-12 science coordinator for the district. It's my second year as the coordinator here in Chelmsford. Very excited to have some special guests with me here tonight. I have Dr. Linda Tonini, who's a biology teacher from the high school. And I also have a couple of fourth grade students from South Row Elementary School. I have Chase Fialoon and Angelo Papadopoulos, who are going to be my wingmen with regards to some information with the elementary curriculum that we have going on.
Is it safe to be here? Yeah.
So what we're going to talk about tonight, first off, we'll discuss a few aspects of how the new science frameworks, which were adopted in 2016, how that relates to our current science curriculum in the high school, but also how that relates to the strategic plan here in Chelmsford Public Schools. I'll go over different aspects of what's happening in the grade spans, the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high school. And I'll have a brief overview of what we look to accomplish in the short term and maybe even the long term going forward. So first off, with regards to our strategic plan, when we look back at this, and this is something that I remember coming in last year, really diving into to come up with an action plan, we talk about preparing students for achieving the next generation science standards. Our Massachusetts state frameworks are adopted based off of those NGSS frameworks. And we'll be looking to have a full alignment process in grades K to 12 and all of our subject areas. Part of that process is we want to look at the pacing guides that every class has, the syllabus that our teachers give to the students. And also beyond that, what types of activities, experiments, real-world tangible applications we can give. So this is robust, and it's not just academic preparation, but it's also career preparation. Last part of that process is how can we look at collaborative agreements with local colleges, universities, and other local institutions where we can have a true pathway for our students for career and college readiness. So one of the things I wanted to highlight with regards to the 2016 frameworks is this concept of the 8 science practices. And some of this language might look familiar if you remember the old scientific method. One of the things that I remember going through training with the state, how they said the scientific method is essentially, I don't want to say it's completely gone, but this idea of the practices where it's a process that it doesn't end. And what I actually decided to do is we have a project that happened or is still ongoing at the high school where one of our teachers, Brian Atchison, he's an environmental science teacher, and this is a great example of how these practices work, where it's 100% student-driven. So when we look at this process of asking questions, developing models, planning out their own investigations, getting data, actually doing some analysis, defending their evidence, and sharing these results out, what Brian Atchison did was environmental science classes. His students actually wanted to look at air quality. And they did this 100% on their own, where they researched current air quality, and they found a grant that they applied for, and they received. Every single classroom in our school, at the high school, has a plant. And they're gonna measure air quality to see if there's a change with it. So what I wanted to do is I made sure that everybody on school committee had their own plant when they leave tonight, so we can measure our air quality, maybe in here, maybe at home.
Mine's gonna die.
It's very hardy, so they purposely chose plants that are hardy,
Okay.
Yes,
so those who don't
Hard
have
to
green
kill.
thumb.
And
no
we wanna
issue with the
thank them
green
for
thumb
not-
of these.
Thank you for not bringing the cockroaches.
As I said, I'm always full of surprises, so
Thank
you
you.
never know.
Is there a grade associated with this at the end?
Yep, so this is,
No, for us.
oh, for you?
Yeah. So
Always
much
full of
pressure.
surprises. So these science practices, these aren't just in isolation with the science department. And this diagram we have here is something that every teacher received last year. And what I like about this is we look at core practices with not just the science, but the mathematics and the ELA. And this is a great conversation starter, and this is something that I really like to go back to and say, what's happening not just in science, but what's happening in ELA and social sciences, but also in mathematics, and where do we find some overlaps? Where do we find unique opportunities where our students are actually doing something in an ELA classroom that relates to a science classroom? Or what's happening in a mathematics lesson that actually applies to a science lesson? So we look at that area right in the middle. These are some practices that definitely go across all curricula. And what separates practices from skills, practices are not just your skills, but it's also the knowledge and content that goes with it. So this is definitely something that's emerging that we're trying to not only embed more in our curriculum, but also how do we assess this? Because this is also part of how the state does assess certain aspects on the new MCAS test. So now let's look at our different grade spans. First up with the elementary schools. Next year is the last year of our rollout with the science curriculum. We've adopted FOSS, full science system in grades K to 4. And we just wrapped up our content PD this year, where at the end of last year with relation to life science, and next year that unit will be carried out in grades K to 4. A couple teachers have actually used the environmental science, life science curriculum to try and basically go through it before everyone does it, just to look at different things that might have worked with regards to ordering specimens. No cockroaches in the middle schools, not to worry. But definitely looking at how we make this work more efficiently. With that professional development, this year we also offered, in conjunction with Ms. Quinn, the social studies coordinator, professional development related to inquiry. And what's nice about this is it wasn't just with all the K-4 teachers, it was also with special education, where we want to look at how do we deepen student understanding, how do we give more opportunities to students. And this was not just a one-shot PD deal. This is something that Ms. Quinn and I have looked at to continue and actually offer more opportunities for staff to increase their knowledge of how to use inquiry in the classroom. This past summer, we developed pacing guides for each grade level to try and synchronize what we offer with all the subject areas. I know you've heard about that at different meetings this year. And as we implement that final unit, we're going to definitely look at this and say what changes we have to make. We don't want these pacing guides to just be one and done documents. We want them to be living, breathing documents that we consistently iterate, that we consistently update to meet the needs of our students. And also part of that is student feedback. One of the highlights of my day is going into a classroom where the students really tell me what they like or even sometimes dislike about the science curriculum. And I could tell you all about it, but I thought it would be in my best interest to have a couple of students here where we have Chase and Angela to talk to a little bit about an experiment that they do in 4th grade.
Hi, my name is Chase Farland, and this is my friend.
Angelo Papadopoulos, and we're in Mrs. Duncan and Miss Kennedy's 4th grade classroom.
This year we have been This year we have been learning about energy. We first learned about electricity, circuit basics, and conductors in insulators.
Then we studied magnets, magnetic fields, and magnetic forces.
Next, we put those ideas together and got to got to build an electromagnet using a rivet, 2 D-cells, a circuit-based wires, and washers.
An electromagnet is a magnet made using the flow of electricity through an insulated wire to produce electromagnetism.
This means we have created a magnet that can turn on and off. The magnetism is stronger when you can wrap the wire around a piece of iron or steel, which becomes an induced magnet.
Now, we'll show you how it works. Any questions?
What's the most you've picked up? Did you try that? What's the most washers you're able to
We
pick up?
haven't tried that yet. Should we try it now?
Sure, let's see how we
There's
can
the
do.
inquiry for you right there.
Around 6, I think.
Ooh.
Oh.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
This with some battery and wire. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Should we go back?
You can go back, or you can stay up if you want. You want to stay up here with us? Okay. So now what we're going to look at is actually, there's a couple photos we shared, not only from their notebooks up in the top here, but just some of the activities they're able to do outside this year. And just a little bit more about what's happening in fourth grade. Fourth grade is 3 different kits. Soils, rocks, and landforms, which we finished up in the middle of the year, the beginning of the year with energy. And also environments, which is going on right now. And for every fourth grade classroom, that will happen next year. In the middle schools, a few years ago, we adopted FOSS Science to extend into grade 5. That was 3 kits with living systems, earth and sun, and mixtures and solutions. Ongoing work that's happening in grade 5 is there is a grade 5 science, technology, engineering MCAS test. That's not a specific grade test, it's actually a grade span, so it's grades 3 through 5. So as we embed more of the science units in grades 3 and 4 each year, obviously we hope to see that growth in the academic achievement in grade 5 when we get to the grade 5 MCAS. This fall in grade 6, we adopted FOSS Science. We did this through 4 kits, and currently we're wrapping up the Diversity of Life kit. This is where we had the hissing cockroaches come in 2 days before April vacation. It was very fun to come in and check on those over April break and make sure that they were fed. Everything was okay. Definitely what's great about having this adoption is the student feedback of how much hands-on work they're doing and how much inquiry is embedded within the new curriculum. And then grade 6 is the beginning of the span of 6 to 8 for the 6 to 8 science, technology, engineering MCAS test, where in grades 7 and 8, one of the things that I looked at was our performance on that MCAS assessment and also going into the high school of what we could do to improve physical science content. So what we're doing in grade 7 and grade 8 is creating and implementing a new physical science unit. In grade 7, that's going to look like a chemistry and chemistry of life unit. And in grade 8, that's going to look like an energy unit. And energy, and not just a standalone unit, but how it also goes across everything related to Earth's processes. Chelmsford High School, we have a lot going on this year. First off, we are piloting new biology programs. We use the high school biology MCAS test as our competency determination with regards to MCAS. And after biology, our students that take chemistry, we're working on benchmark performance tasks. This is another great avenue of how we look at our science practices. So these aren't just necessarily skills related to chemistry, but this is also what are overarching performance tasks that are common across every chemistry class that our students can exhibit. This year we started a dual enrollment with Middlesex Community College, and we did that with our biotechnology class. Had several students partake in that, and we're very successful with it. A couple small changes that have happened with our AP offerings and our electives. With regards to AP, we've had AP Physics 2 the last few years. A change going forward next year is we've actually replaced that class with AP Physics C with mechanics. And what that AP Physics C mechanics class is that's a calculus-based physics class. For students who have gone into AP Physics 2, are looking at doing mechanical engineering or the physical sciences in college, the AP Physics C is a better preparation course for that. Also with electives, we were able to add on to biotechnology this year with Biotechnology 1, which was offered for dual enrollment. Next year, we're offering Biotechnology 2. So now we're starting to look at what is essentially that next bullet point, not just a standalone class, but a pathway. So when I look at our furniture construction courses, our architecture, civil engineering courses, and now biotechnology courses, what does this look like in terms of pathways? And how does this relate to the state's idea of having true innovation pathways that we can develop and share for college and career readiness? This year, we also had a great opportunity to work with the math department, and that was twofold. That first area was we actually looked at common instructional practices. So in other words, what are our staff doing to engage kids, to get them to collaborate, to talk, and really show what they understand and what they learn? To have all of the math teachers and the science teachers, grades 5 to 12 in one room, to look at these ideas and practices was phenomenal, and just to hear the ideas exchanged with each other. The research behind how staff are able to have common language with students across multiple disciplines and how that improves growth is tremendous. So this is, hopefully this is a great start to that. The second part of the work with the math department is we looked at our own pacing guides. And I'll give you a quick example. With our physics curriculum, we looked at the students enrolled in physics honors. We looked at what they were taking for math. And we looked at the majority of that math enrollment. And we took that math teacher in a room. We took the physics teachers in the room and said, okay, let's look at our pacing guides. Let's look at what we're doing. Are there certain things in order that we should change or modify to better improve? Right out of the gate, we noticed there's a couple lessons and units that we could shift in math and in physics so that the students who were enrolled in both these classes could progress more uniformly and have a better foundation. So those types of collaborations and discussions we're looking at implementing next year. And then to circle back to biology, biology does have a new MCAS assessment. This year it is not computer-based, but it is a partial modification based on the new frameworks, and next year full implementation. And I have Dr. Linda Taniti here to talk about what's happening in biology here at Chelmsford High School.
Yeah. So what I have listed here are just some of the framework, some of the standards. The 2006 standard, we just took one particular learning objective. Here we're just highlighting, looking at DNA replication. And you can see if it's written, some of the words they used in 2006 was more describe, explain, very, here's the book definition, and can you regurgitate that book definition. In 2016, you can see that same standard, a little bit changed how they started saying now the students are expected to construct a model. So these are the things that we started to see that transition in teaching in that aspect too, is now instead of just giving all these definitions and can you guys, find the right choice and the answer, now it's spending more time with those hands-on and again, some aspects of it, that problem-solving, career readiness. Here I have an example of one of the activities I did with my students. I gave them a template of DNA. I told them, okay, you need to model for me how transcription and translation occurs. And I went around to each benches, and they had to come up with their own way to show me this. So like that little, I don't know if you can see, like the student has a kind of like slide around the DNA. They came up with that on their own as they problem solved. And as I started challenging them on saying, okay, you're describing this, you're explaining it, but now can you really show me what's going on at each step of the way? And it was kind of like that. It's interesting to see the kids kind of go, oh, I think I got the answer. And then you start pushing them a little bit more, and they realize they have to tweak it and add it on, which is, again, kind of going with those science practices, is going back and, having a problem, trying to solve it, and refining it as they move along. So that's like one example of how changing a little bit the instruction based on those standards. Shown also here, a couple other things done with this in the classroom. Again, kind of keeping also an idea of some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Again, we talked about this, I know, before, but the UN Sustainable Development Goals were just established in 2017 as something that should be done throughout all nations, and it's not just in education. But it's interesting how, with my collaboration work also being done at Harvard, how I'm seeing they're also integrating into their curriculum. And so some of the things you can see here is up in the upper left-hand corner. One of the things that me and Ms. Carol Brule did with her APES class, or AP Environmental Science, and my AP Biology, is we had a student come from UMass Lowell to produce a climate change mock UN. And basically, students sat there and represented different countries of the world or different nations, and they had to, find out how to better sustain with the goal, again, problem solving, working together. You're integrating not just science, but you're also integrating social studies, because you started learning a lot about the politics and how to negotiate, and it was really interesting how they had to barter their resources to help some developing nations versus the more richer nations, and how they're going to work with that. But also they saw the difficulty of having to do that, and how to maintain economic sanctions in their countries too. So it was really interesting how you dealt with economics, you dealt with climate action, and you also dealt with politics at the same time. In the upper right-hand corner, the same work that I had the students working on developing models, here's a modification that I used for another class, where instead of sitting there and me giving them, hey, can you guys come up on your own, I had them introduced to a student from England who had cystic fibrosis. It was done online. It was a module that they worked with. This girl blogged about her cystic fibrosis. The kids got to learn about this disease. So now we're introducing number 3, good health and well-being of sustainable development goals. And as they're sitting there and learning about the student, then we started to talk about how it's a genetic disease. I gave them actual publications, modified for their readings, where they got to look at this research and see, kind of deduce the same way as the researchers, how it was passed on genetically. And then what you see up there is they're using just simple Post-it notes and ribbon tape, just actually sequencing out the DNA, going through the process of transcription and translation, modeling it as they kind of learned in a global way also of this disease, and realizing it's not just something that we're teaching them that has to be just that they use here in Chelmsford. It's something that they can take out with them, getting them for that career readiness. And again, collaboration. You see on the bottom here too, students taking what they've learned and drawing it on the lab benches with chalk markers, and doing so in a way so they can talk to each other and explain it to each other, and sharing their resources away. So nice way of collaboration along the way. And again, kind of keeping that idea of it's not just something that they're going to use here, but getting them ready for the careers outside of Chelmsford High School.
Awesome. Thank you. So just to summarize and also look forward of what's happening with science, as I said before, we'll be looking at completing our curriculum rollout in grades K to 4, which will be happening next school year. We'll be looking at the new MCAS for science, technology, engineering, grades 5, 8, and the high school biology. We want to look at that data that we get and say, all right, based on this data and overall performance trends, what are some changes we might need to make? What are other professional development opportunities we could offer? Or even what can we do to really change the activities we give that give more of a hands-on experience? Also, as I said, we'll be looking at our current CHS science pathway. Part of that is program acceleration. And what I mean by that is, what are certain things that students can show from a competency perspective that might actually enable them to move forward in one of our pathways a little bit sooner? What sort of skills and practices have they shown us? For example, to look at, we have some students who have started Introduction to Architecture who have been able to demonstrate beyond proficiency with Vectorworks, who can start to do intermediate architecture tasks halfway through the year, which is a great idea to have. But that also goes into our career and technical program evaluation. Once again, what type of pathways can we develop that really explore innovation and creativity, and also looks at meeting the demands of what the state considers to be a true innovative program. All this can't happen without the phenomenal staff that I do have and their effort and dedication. There's no question into that. But also looking at here in town, and also in the surrounding Merrimack Valley, what local business opportunities are there? Not just from your typical internship or co-op idea of, but what about professional development? Who could come in and talk to our kids or even our staff about what's happening in the workforce now? I mean, we all know science changes so fast. And the reality is, we're preparing kids for careers that have not even been invented yet. Mm-hmm. And it's a big challenge. It's definitely something I feel like we're up for. But I'm definitely open to looking at the vast opportunities that are around us and how we can integrate those. And that's all I have. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much again to Dr. Tonini, to Chase and Angela for coming up. I'm definitely looking at what I could do with that, hopefully in a good way. But I'll take any questions you guys have.
Any questions, anybody?
No questions, but just a comment. I mean, every time we have one of these presentations, such good work, and it's no question why our students do so well, both in school and post-secondary. Great. It's outstanding.
Thank you.
So
Absolutely.
I'd like to say that, first of all, I think having a coordinator in this department is amazing.
Yeah.
Because you can see the interplay, and you can't see that without a coordinator in each one of these departments. So I think that that's extremely important. Math, I think physics is applied math, so there you go. It's wonderful to see that. But on top of it all, my question to you is, when I looked at the standards, I initially remember when they came in, there were 3 areas of it: science, engineering, technology. So I'm seeing when you did your report that there's more engineering coming into play.
Correct.
I see the math and where the interactions are. Now we've got the technology. Now, is that a totally separate department? How does that work?
So that's something where I'm able to collaborate with Marilyn Sweeney with regards to our technology and engineering, not just with curriculum, but also with different electives at the high school, for example. So if we look at our computer science, robotics, Project Lead the Way courses at the high school, which Marilyn Sweeney runs, she's fantastic to work with in terms of how can we have students partake in those, but also how does that serve an extension of what's happening in our current science curriculum?
And as we have the computers come in, and you're going to get that at an entire grade level this coming year, do you see more opportunities there for your area of teaching?
I do, and I think the introduction of having full access to technology is great. I'm lucky enough to be able to go around to several classrooms now and see it used frequently. I can tell you that several of our classrooms at the high school, we have actually workstations. So if students are in groups of 4, they have their own workstation in the chemistry and physics classrooms. With regards to Google Apps, and I look at one of those science practices of your computational analysis in mathematics, I'll give an example. How to use Google Sheets. How can students actually collaborate on one document where you can have different tabs for different groups? Kids can see everyone's data. You can compile that data, and you can have a whole class analysis instantaneously, and they can do it at home. Even students who may not be in that day, what did you miss? It's all right there on Classroom. And then you can look at this from block to block, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with other coordinators in the state and also talk to teachers who have moved on to different capacities where what are some overlapping activities? What does the data in Chelmsford look like compared to the data in Westford or the data in Melrose, which is an awesome thing to look at, because now you're talking about a collaboration between different districts. And as Dr. Tonini said, how do we extend this even further? What does this look like in Chelmsford, Mass, even over to Chelmsford, England? It'd be a great opportunity to pursue.
My final comment is going to be, it's great to hear that you're Dr. Tonini, because the level of education that I think is needed in a teacher today who's passing on this type of knowledge to our students is immense. And I wonder if you could comment on what's the challenge today in bringing in teachers to this level, because I think I learned this stuff, maybe never, but possibly in my college courses, later on in my college courses. So I would think that this is getting more and more challenging, especially because you've got industry needing these folks with this level of education out there as well, and offering a lot more incentive than what we can as to the teachers. So what's your challenge there?
I think you definitely hit the nail on the head with what's available from an industry perspective, both financial and professional, of what different people want to go into. It's not often that you hear about a physics major in college or a chemistry major in college that you're majoring in that field to go teach it after. So there's different things that we can do from an educational perspective to inform these colleges and universities of, this isn't just an idea of you're not going to just become a mechanical engineer, but there's an opportunity where you can go back and actually teach this content and this material. Yes, it's a challenge. I'll have no problem admitting that. But at the end of the day, the content is definitely there, but I want to find what's best for kids. So no matter what position it is, and this is something that the coordinators and I have spoken at length about, you always want to find somebody who's best for the kids. Having someone with a background in different science content areas is tough. Certain disciplines are a little bit harder than others, but we're lucky enough, and I'm beyond lucky to have the staff that I have.
Great, thank you.
Just to echo it, having been in such similar situations, what happens a lot of times is people start up and go into engineering and these other things, and they decide, maybe I want to be a teacher, and that's when you get some of your best teachers, because they have that experience and they have that, that background, and once they get into it, they really, learn that teaching is a great occupation, and working with the kids and all that. A couple questions for me. First of all, what are you studying about the cockroaches?
So this is part of our diversity of life unit where we're looking at different, yeah, you had to ask, different aspects and characteristics of plants versus insects, and how those environments can affect each other. They are loud.
Oh, yes.
As soon as you put your finger on one, they will surprise you.
What are you going to do with them when you're done?
We're exploring different protocols. We
Mine has
actually
a big
have
backyard if you want to just.
the whole invasive species thing. We frown upon that. But we actually have a couple teachers in the schools already that use them throughout their extensions. Chrissy Carlson over in grade 7 at Parker already had a few in her room. And her room is awesome to go into. It's Peter Bruin's former classroom. So she'll be actually taking on quite a few of these after, just for the extensions that she does with students.
My other question is, at the high school, what's the normal sequence for the sciences, like freshman, sophomore, junior?
So right now we have a couple different options. Students coming in taking honors biology would typically go honors biology, chemistry honors, or chemistry H2, depending if they move down or not. And then into physics is an option, the AP offerings we have and the elective offerings. Other students who are enrolled in physical science would typically go from physical science to biology to chemistry. Some go to physics, some go to environmental science. And once again, different AP options that we have and different elective options.
Okay, so do most of your kids take the biology, chemistry, physics, or do you find a lot of variation in that?
It's a variation year to year if you look at the trends, but overall it's between a quarter and a third will take the honors biology as freshmen, and then the rest are in physical science.
And my last question was just, in terms of the new MCAS, having been around when the old science MCAS was around, which wasn't very good, how are these new MCAS? Are they?
So very fortunate, and you can definitely add on to this, very fortunate to have a teacher at the high school and a teacher in the middle school who are actually on the assessment development committee. So I'm getting firsthand information of what this design looks like. I'm not getting information to what the test is.
Right.
But having that resource, literally a text message or a visit to the classroom away to talk about what's going on has been tremendous. And if you want to add on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, some of the differences that we're definitely seeing is it is gonna be computer-based. Some things that I like about the new testing, it is because it's computer-based. One of the things about biology that's always been an issue is it's language-based. It's very language-dense. And kids now can click on words and get definitions if needed. So I think that's really helpful for some kids, especially if English is not their first language. So getting rid of that obstacle. I think so that is helpful. I think the other thing that's kind of neat, and again, we're learning more about, is how it's almost kind of fun to take it, like that I would say. Like, I'm not saying like a test is fun, but, it's not just, circle here, like fill in. There's a lot of drag and drop. There's like put in order. So it's almost like the kids are already kind of accustomed to this kind of like different formats and such, and it's assessing them, but it's assessing them in a way that's almost engaging in some ways for the students. So, again, we're playing around with it, we're learning it. Again, some of the biology trials right now is we're also looking at textbooks to help us to also engage those students to get them prepared for it, and that's kind of interesting for us to learn and play around with, but kind of fun at the same time to see the kids' reactions to that too.
Great. Interesting to see how it,
I know,
ends up.
it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's nerve-wracking, but interesting.
I'd like to echo what other people have said about your teachers. I think they do a phenomenal job. I think that, content is always important, but you can know the information, but knowing how to teach it is a skill,
Correct.
In and of itself, and I think that your teachers do a phenomenal job with that. It's also nice to see, as I've talked to some of the science teachers, they're real go-getters. They're really out searching for information and opportunities and different ways of presenting the information, and I think that's just so cool to see, that they're so enthusiastic and so motivated to get out there and to learn about new things and figure out ways to be able to introduce them in the classroom. So, kudos to your departments, all of them, from K through 12.
Yeah.
I think we do a phenomenal job of preparing our students. I'll use one of my kids as a case in point. She went up to college and had it in her head that she should be a lab assistant in her freshman year. I don't know why she thought that, but she did. And when she went there and talked to the person that was interviewing her, the professor was shocked at the amount of experience she had in the lab. And this was in large part due to some of the work that you had done with her, as well as some of the other teachers at the high school, and said that some of the experiences that she had had at the high school weren't even experiences that some of the upperclassmen and graduate students had had.
Correct.
And she got the job. So it's really quite incredible what it is that we're able to offer, but it really couldn't be done without the incredible staff that you have.
It is.
It's, I have to echo it. I mean, it's, I mean, it isn't, you talk about being go-getters. You have your, hey, how's everything going? And then it's, can I show you a lab I just came up with? Or can I talk to you about an idea? I mean, it's always ongoing, which is great to see.
Right. I mean, the last thing I heard about, and maybe it was you that I was talking to, was the whole hydroponic
Yep.
gardening project, which is amazing.
Can I say one final, from me, anyway, I won't say anything else. I'm excited about science and math, only because I'm not good at it, okay? And so it's always interesting to me to see that you can develop this ability at this level, even in children who may not really be leaning towards this type of thing, okay? And I happen to have two students who are very different from each other and both at the same grade level. And what I'm loving is that interaction, because learning it in that science area and then being able to transfer into the writing and into the ability to put it in a different methodology that you might be much better at than you are at science is also important. To be able to communicate it is just as important as it is to be able to do it and to know that knowledge. So this really excites me in my mind, because I think this brings it to every level of student, no matter what their aptitude for the particular science area might be. So I'm excited about that for you, from your department. It's great.
I just want to say a couple of things to highlight. To answer your question a little bit about MCAS, even in any of the departments, I think Dr. Tonini hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of things that would have been considered accommodations are not accommodations anymore. They're open for all the students to use. Who couldn't use a way to find out a definition of a word, especially academic vocabulary that maybe perhaps they weren't exposed to. So that's happening for all three of the content areas that they're being tested in. Couple of things to highlight is we do have great partnerships with UMass Lowell, and one of them is the U-Teach program, and their goal is to have people that are in the sciences go into teaching. So these students are physics majors, chemistry majors. Many of them come to Chelmsford High School. We train them. Hopefully we hire them in time when we need them. But that program gets them into the teaching program to look at something different than what they probably went into that major for ahead of time. So that's a great partnership with them. And the department is really good about finding some of those grants. They may not be huge grants, but they're enough grants to get, through one of the projects to be able to have the funding for it. So that's very helpful for us. And just even the cross-curricular work that goes around with that, working with all the departments so that we're linking the curriculum together so it's not just in columns and isolation. And what does writing look like in the sciences compared to the history sciences, and then the narrative piece that might happen in English language arts. So it's a lot of work, it's a lot of collaboration, it's a lot of getting everybody together, but they do a great job with it.
I've seen this poor thing.
And thank you. I thought that was a great presentation. And Anita and, I'm sorry, Linda, I'm sorry. Linda, I'm not doing good with names tonight here. But no, thank you very much for the presentation. It was excellent. And it gave a nice progression of elementary, middle, high school. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
much. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for coming, kids.
Report back on the plans. Report back next year on the plans.
And we already looked better.
I always joke with him about his first name.
Presentation's the best part, every meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're good?
Yep.
So, moving on to the agenda, item number 3 this evening, we do have our third community forum, which is planned for the Monday, May 6th, 2019. It's going to be at 7 o'clock at the police station, the training room, where we've had the last two sessions. And Linda was nice enough to put together a draft agenda for your review this evening, and then actually like a publication kind of messaging that we can push out to invite anyone interested, parents, community members, to come to this forum. So just wanted to share that with you this evening, get comments, feedback, we can make any edits you'd like to, and then we'll start advertising that to try to get a crowd for that meeting on May 6th, again at the police department at 7 o'clock. And this is overarching kind of theme, how all of our work around social emotional learning ties in with academics, and making those connections for parents.
Anybody have any thoughts?
Just gonna have to watch out for town meeting, right?
What's that?
I said we just have to be careful with town meeting. Oh, would it be possible we would go to that on Monday?
What, no, this is a Wednesday, no, what's this, what?
This
no,
is
a
on a-
Monday?
This
This
is
is-
Monday, May
Yeah.
6th, so I think it's fine.
True, if it goes
Well,
third
if it
day,
went-
does it go Monday or Thursday?
It goes
If Monday, Thursday, then
Thursdays.
what?
Monday.
Monday, Thursday, Monday. So it would only be an issue if it went 3.
Yeah. So we'll have to
I
go
think that's what
fast.
it is,
We'll have to make sure the town meeting goes fast.
Yeah, you're a town meeting rep. You
Yeah.
keep that stuff in line.
Okay. Excuse me. All right, so any thoughts on the topics or things that you want to make sure get included or?
No, I think we've discussed it.
Yeah, again, we did kind of talk
Yeah,
about this,
yeah.
just from your perspective, we figured we'd do a little introduction. Lorraine Wilson, our new coordinator for social emotional learning, and Katie Sims, our coordinator for health, PE, wellness. We'll do an overarching overview of what's happening, and then Linda and some of the academic department coordinators will talk about how their subject areas all tie in, and then open it up for discussion and question and answers.
And one of our consultants will also be there with us, Eric Mann, who's been working with the district to help support this conversation as well.
But do we like the materials? Okay to
Yeah,
start pushing?
absolutely. I think when we're thinking about parent forums in the future, I would like to see us, because we talked a little bit tying in with the academics, okay, but even more of a focus on academics maybe at the beginning of next year. Just what are we doing and why are we doing it, you know, from K through 12, so that parents understand. I mean, this was a phenomenal presentation tonight. But just so they can see, you know, all the different aspects of what it is that we do kind of in one presentation. As I said, that's just, I'm thinking down for the future.
Yes. And I think I actually, I might be using the wrong word. I don't know, because the education has its own lingo, just like my legal field has its own lingo. But when I talk about a curriculum map, what I would love to see is something that maps out, okay, in math, these are the sections we offer at each different level. Because, for example, when you're coming to us and saying, okay, we need to fund this, that, or the other thing, it's important for, I think, me as a school committee member, and I don't know how everybody else feels, but it's important to me to know, all right, I need to 10 positions at the elementary level for math because this is what we're doing. Or we need 2 physics teachers in applied whatever because this is what we're doing. I think it just ties in. It's not a matter of, this is very important to me as a school committee member. I don't want to get into the business of establishing all of that's your jobs. It truly is your function as administrators, and that's why you're here, and you have the knowledge of all this. We don't. But in order to try to understand and to be able to correctly fund what needs to be funded and to allocate the resources where the resources need to be allocated, I think it's important for us to have that overall mapping of what's going on. So if you come and you say, we don't need this anymore at this level, we can clearly picture it and see it. It would be a reference tool that we return to all the time. In addition, so much has changed. I remember when my children first went into first grade here, there was a kind of an experimental thing going on with ELA, and then it moved into the maths, and then now we have the science, and so things have changed so much along the way that it's again good to have that whole outline. And it could be done by coordinators in each one of the departments, and then bringing it all together so that we can see it. It would be really tremendous, a great tool, in my opinion.
So kind of like what we saw tonight with science, is that kind of what you're
Right.
looking for?
Right, but just really in each department,
Right.
so we see what's going on. For example, we're bringing on a world languages coordinator. It'll be good to see what's happening in world languages, and we're gonna have a different standard coming for, the global type of certification, which means that we've got to meet those challenges, and do we have sufficient staffing to meet those challenges? All of those things are important for us to physically see, I think.
Right, so as we're focusing on the social, I think it's important that we do the social emotional learning. I don't want to, get too far off topic here, but I guess, what I was trying to say, in some previous meetings is, exactly what Maria said is education has changed so much, and I think that people don't understand it's not reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore. It's way more complicated than that. And I think it would serve us well as a school committee to help people, the community, understand what is involved in just the academics now, not even adding on all the other things that we do, which is tremendous. And as we think about a forum in the future, to be able to maybe focus on some of that.
Just like a point of clarification, when you say like curriculum maps, when John was talking earlier about like the course sequencing at the high school, how you might take, say, honors biology and then chem and physics, is that what you're talking about? Like a mapping of a course
Right.
sequence?
And that's he coordinates certain aspects of that. So now I understand. I didn't understand about, there's a separate technology area that's being coordinated there. And then it'll be important too, when people are talking, what's the interaction of all of these different departments? And if you've got the picture of it, it's that much easier. At the elementary level, I don't know, for example, your ELA coordinator, let's say, what levels does that coordinator coordinate, and is that sufficient? I have no idea. So if you were going to come and present something on it, I would remember it for that minute, but if I refer to that picture all the time and we continuously update it, it's gonna be so much easier for us all. What Donna said is also very important. The community needs to see the complexity of what we're dealing with here. And not only that, but in the social emotional component, it's brought into every aspect of education. It's also in every classroom. You're dealing with the social emotional learning. So I think if you can map out everything that's going on and how the extra staff, quote unquote, the social emotional learning staffing in our system works in conjunction with everybody else within the system, so important to see. So if my student needs to set up a schedule and is all anxious about being able to set up that schedule, my student is not going to concentrate on what's going on in my subject matter. But I know right away she's going to go to a guidance counselor, and her guidance counselor is going to be able to help her out. So if that's part of the social emotional component of her well-being. I think it's important for us to have that overall picture.
And I think that's what this forum will at least accomplish that part of it,
Yeah, we can talk about, let me take a stab at a couple of things. A couple of things are floating through my head. I think we weren't sure if you were thinking more like what is being taught, because the first thing that popped into my mind at one point is to take a look at the standards-based report cards K through 4. At least it would give you an idea of what we're measuring students against, so you'd see the main heading of the domain for mathematics, and then what is the kindergarten student learning, what is the first grade. So when I hear curriculum map, that's like when
what
you
you're
talked about
thinking.
pacing guides, those are pretty complex. That would be very overwhelming, I think, for anybody that doesn't do that for a living. If you are thinking more like an organizational chart, like an org chart, like this
Of
is
the
this person,
academics.
this is the levels that they cover, and this is the kind of staff that they have, I can take a couple of stabs at that and take a look at what you think.
Well, for the academics, so for example, if you're teaching math and it's in a team, we're gonna see, it's, teamed up. What I'm thinking about is, what's the subject, who coordinates that subject, what are we offering in each one of these? So at the elementary level, it's probably gonna look very much all the same at the 4 elementary schools. But when it comes to the middle school, again, it'll be a little bit different because of the way McCarthy's set up versus with a special team and so on versus the other Parker. And then when it comes to the high school, I'm totally lost because there's so much
Well,
going
that's in the
on over
program
there.
of studies too, so
Right.
that might be helpful for you to take a peek at as well. But if you, and also if you see some examples of what you're saying, because sometimes
We'll pass it on.
my interpretation might be different than your interpretation, but let me just kind of, I'm not a very good drawer, but I will map out something, that's why I use the
I
computer.
have to agree, that it's a huge amount of information, so if we can break it up like we did tonight with the science coordinator, and
might be-
explaining, this is what we do at the elementary school, this is what we do in the middle school, this is the high school sequence, then the next time when the math coordinator comes in, make sure we emphasize with them, this is what we would like to hear from
That'd
them.
be great.
Social studies and the new foreign language, and, I don't know if you could do it all at once, I think it would just be too much, so, but if we.
Yeah, and
kinda
even
break
in my
it
head, like when we put up
manageable.
our job postings, they're based on categories, like here's your teaching piece of it, here's your academic piece, but then here's your budgetary piece, and here's your managerial piece, so just trying to get it to look coherent.
But if you do it by the departments, by the end of a year, we will have a complete picture. If we do it at each one of the presentations, and then it'll be, next year, we can look at it again and say, how did it change this year? So if we have it in an actual format type of thing, it would be
It's just trying to get an
excellent.
idea ahead around what
Okay.
what does that format look like, and then how is it user-friendly?
Yes, and
Because we
my,
have a lot of acronyms.
my goal is not just to give you work, seriously, it is to have a tool that we can use so that we don't add more to your work in the future. In other words, just really to have it down and then just continuously change it as we're updating things.
Yeah, and that might be more of like a summer project piece, because right now we're in the thick of it. I mean,
Understood?
there's not one day that something's
Understood.
not happening.
I think we've done a great job with the parent forums over the course of this year. And as we think about going forward and what some of our goals are as a district, we may want to tie some of the topics into that so that people, as I said, can understand, what our plan is going forward on a lot of different levels.
And kind of add to that, if there are parents out there watching us and have ideas,
Absolutely.
they would like
Yes.
to see a public forum on, let us know, and we can discuss them at this meeting, so. So getting back to this, everybody
So we're okay?
fairly comfortable with the agenda and the advertisements, everything for this? Better not overwater it already.
Just try. It was bothering me.
All right, so we'll move on.
There's
Next
water
up,
on our computer.
It's fine.
Next up, we did include the new liaison assignments. So I sent these out, but what I try to do is just go through, and I had, people sent me their preferences and tried to do that as best I could. Try to even up the workload too, that some of these pretty consistent meetings, PTO meetings are pretty consistent. Some of the subcommittees and the negotiation committees are pretty consistent. Some of the others, as we discussed before, it might be just a once a year, go into that particular group and talk about what's going on in the schools, if they want us to come in and talk about certain things, doing that. So I try to break it up, and it didn't kind of copy off very well, but the top section is the negotiation and the subcommittees, and I did eliminate some of those subcommittees we weren't using, so really the only one I kept was the policy subcommittee. I went through our policies, and there's nothing that requires us to have a facility subcommittee or superintendent evaluation subcommittee, and we talked about last year that we probably shouldn't have that anyways. If we find we need something like that, if we find that we need to have,
You can appoint an ad hoc.
we can always put one together, and as Donna mentioned, most of these things we talked about in our meetings as a group anyways. So the only one I did keep was the policy subcommittee, and I did, in looking at our new policies, our subcommittees technically have 2 members and an alternate, so I did add an alternate to that particular one, because that was what it's in our policies. Next are all the school organizations, so all the PTOs, and then groups like the CPAC and the ELL Council are on there, and each of those is a member and an alternate. So, I think, again, it's important that we get to these groups. So if we are the liaison for this group, we should reach out and to the presidents of the PTOs or the chairs of these groups and find out when their meetings are and make an effort to get there. And if we can't, to make sure that we talk to the person that's the alternate and see if they can go in our stead. Because again, that's our best opportunity to interact with the parents and the teachers and everything, the principals in those schools. And then the bottom group are just those other organizations we talked about, that. I don't know if we need so much a liaison as a contact person, so that if they want somebody from the school committee to attend their meetings, they can reach out to those people. And so I did add in a few that we talked about. Senior Center was one we talked about. I forgot to put a Board of Health. I don't know if people think that's a necessary one to add on there. Okay, doesn't really matter, yeah. So, and then the legislative outreach one, we're all involved with that, whether it be MASC or our state legislators or federal legislators. So if everybody's good with this, these will be our liaison assignments. If you have some difficulties, let me know, and we can try to make some changes.
No vote required on this one?
What's that?
No vote required?
Nope, I think we're all set.
Marie, would you mind setting me up with the council schools board? Do some-
Sure,
Yeah, do you mind?
I will be glad to do that.
Thank you.
All right, so what's next?
Warrant signing schedule.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's the other thing. I know we had this emailed to us also, but just to put it in there so you can put it in your fridge. So we can make sure that we get to our, the dates that were there. So we're at the end, obviously, of the cycle, so we only have, a couple more months left. But you can kind of see who's up for this next, I guess it'll be Friday, right? Friday, and then we'll get into May. And then Joanne and I will sit down at some point and kind of look at the dates for next year and maybe try to space them out a little bit. So there's some times where you go 3 months in a row, or 9 weeks in a row, whatever. Maybe try to break that up a little bit, if possible.
So, is it usually at around 3 you meet up at the administrative
It's
building?
whatever's convenient, right?
Okay.
So I ask the ladies to have everything to me by Wednesday. And then I take Wednesday and Thursday for my review. And then usually we're ready by Thursday night. And that's when one of my team sends out the email that says it's ready. So then whatever works best in your schedule from whenever you get that email on.
So everybody doesn't have to come at the same time? Oh, okay. So just reach out, okay. I'll come for training at the same time, so whoever's coming on the 26th, you're training me. Okay. Thank
I'll
you.
probably be there about 3 on Friday. So
Okay, great, thank you.
If Donna, Donna and I, or John. So if that doesn't
Thank
work out.
you, I appreciate it.
All right, okay.
Great. The next item on the agenda this evening, I'm going to ask Joanna to just present the fiscal 19 third quarter financial report.
In your packet, you have my cover memo, and then you have a year-to-date budget report listing through the end of March how we're doing on our spend of the 59 million. And then you have a grant and revolving fund summary, and then the student activity account balances for the high school and the 2 middle schools. The memos, the similar format to the prior quarters. We've talked about these variances before. I've highlighted them again. They've stayed the same because a lot of it has to do with labor, and once a variance is there, mostly favorable, it's going to stay there because we're not adding staff. So on page 3, this same variance is there. We're favorable $82,287 in the curriculum directors, and the main reason for that is we hired the coordinator of SEL once we were into the school year in early December, so that favorable variance of $34,498 is going to stay with us. The next major variances are on pages 5 through 7, and that's the classroom teachers. And we're favorable by $395,813. And for the same reasons we've talked about. One of them is the lane change account. We're favorable by $66,366. And this is because we budget amount for a teacher who is going to go up in their degrees, and then for whatever reason, sometimes they don't achieve that in the year they thought they would. So that favorable variance will stay there with us throughout the year. And then the second reason is when we budget the vacant positions in fiscal 19, we budget at Master Step 3, but then it depends on who we actually hire for that position, what they come in at. And if they came in at Bachelor Step 1, you're going to be favorable. And that favorable variance is going to stay there throughout the year. Or if we hire mainly a transfer, would fill it at a Master Step 11, you're going to be unfavorable. And when all of those net together in all of our teaching positions, we are still going to be favorable in the category. The next variance is on page 7, the specialist teachers. And we've talked, and that's special ed, ELL, reading. And right now, we're slightly unfavorable by the $4,032, but that's because we have budgeted the offset to $115,000 to the CHIPS revolving fund. And once we make that journal entry in the end of the year, that category will be favorable. And then skipping to page 17, we're slightly unfavorable in school security, $26,408,000. And if you recall, we budgeted an offset of $33,300 to the transportation revolving fund to offset our security costs there, and we'll make that journal entry in the fourth quarter, and that category will be slightly favorable. And then page 19, special ed tuitions. You're familiar with this chart. We budget all of our special ed tuitions in 3 accounts. The local account, which is here, the circuit breaker fund, and the school choice revolving fund. Overall, special ed tuitions we've budgeted $7.45 million. And then there'll be offsets to the circuit breaker and the school choice revolving fund, again in the fourth quarter. So right now, all of the charges are in the local budget, so you can see them all in one spot. Right now, we have encumbered and paid out $7.2 million. In the end, so you can kind of see it in the chart. Once all the offsets are made, we will still be on the local budget at $3.8 million in the local budget. So there will not be a variance in this category. The footnotes kind of explain this in more detail. Just kind of let you, we've talked about the Valley credit here as one of the offsets, the $549,000, school choice offset of $250,000. And then the last chart is the school choice revolving fund. And this is there to show we have right now a current balance of the $1.5 million. We estimate to come in by the end of the year at $1.6 million, and then the offset of $250,000 for the special ed tuitions, and we'll still have a balance of $1.3 million. We stop there and see, again, this chart hasn't changed from the prior quarters. Really the only thing that's changed is the actuals coming through. And see if you have any questions on any of the variances on the local budget or special ed tuitions or school choice. And I'll stop there.
Just a quick question. Is school choice the fund that has a cap on it? We can only carry so much every year?
No.
Am I thinking of?
Circuit breaker.
Circuit breaker.
Okay, just
Yep.
checking.
Yep.
Thank you.
But we'll be using the school choice funds You can use it for pretty much anything for educational.
School choice doesn't have a cap. That's the fund that we're targeting the one-on-one initiative with.
Right, yeah.
So that's how we're gonna pay for that, but whatever funds you have available at fiscal year end automatically roll to the next year. What we're watching closely is circuit breaker. You can only carry over the amount of your total appropriation from the previous year. So whatever our actual amount is, that's 2.8 million,
Yep.
is the maximum that we could carry over to the following year.
Okay.
Correct. So what we're watching closely is last year, we happened to get the fourth quarter payment, wasn't processed until after July 1st of 18, so technically it fell in fiscal 19. So we don't know if the last fourth quarter payment's gonna come in prior to June 30th or after. So that's what we have to watch closely. We're gonna assume worst-case scenario that it actually came in this fiscal year, and we received 5 technically quarter payments in 1 year. We wanna make sure that we don't go over the 2.8 million.
Got it.
It'd be nicer if it just came in afterward, or you always just had 4 quarterly payments coming in a fiscal year, but it just may not happen, and we don't want to have there be an excess of funds in that particular fund. So we're gonna be
Was
kind of
that a rarity that it came
scrutinizing
in
that.
late that last year, or?
It happens from
Yeah.
time to time. Unfortunately, you just never know when the state's gonna, it's all based on the wire transfer, when the funds technically hit the cities, or the city or town accounts. It has happened in the past,
Okay.
you know.
Right.
And then it also might come in on the 29th. You just don't know.
Even just like this past payment came in April 2nd, so it didn't hit my third quarter. So you just gotta, like Jay says, you have to watch. And that, what Jay was just explaining is kind of in the second paragraph below the chart.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Tried to highlight the.
Can I wanted to ask one question, so I don't have this in my mind and think that we have all this money available that we don't. On pages 5 through 7, the classroom teachers, the $395, almost $400,000, we have that money in excess of what we need?
Correct. As a projection.
So, and this carries into,
No. So this is a third quarter report on just current finances to report through March, the end of March, where we stand. In the first meeting in May, so our next school committee meeting, we will actually have a formal kind of projection of what our available funds at the end of the fiscal year are going to be. And we
Okay.
will then also have some recommendations for you as to if we want to look at some one-time spending. You wouldn't want to actually put something in the budget that's going to have a recurring cost or carry over from year to year, but you consider one-time spending. The other thing we'll talk about is like our circuit breaker account, how much
Okay.
money we want to try to have at fiscal year end, because we can actually transfer less from circuit breaker into the local budget, and technically have the local budget offset some of those costs for the sped tuitions, so that we can carry more money over in circuit breaker. You cannot carry money over in the local budget.
okay,
So in our first meeting in May, we'll kind of lay that all out for you.
discuss that.
The big
Alright.
takeaways from me today is that we're in very good financial shape.
Alright.
I don't have any concerns about any of the personnel or non-personnel line items of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to be looking at an excess at the end of the year, and we're going to give you a kind of a roadmap in May when we get together to recommend how you might want to spend that or save that, and tell you how you can do that.
Yeah, my concern is I don't want to be thinking that we have some money available that we really don't have available.
Right.
Just like last time, we talked about the turf fields, and I thought that money might be available. I forgot we have to replace turf.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Appreciate it.
And then, any questions on the grant and revolving fund summary? The top portion of the kind of the one-page chart is the entitlement grants, and all are in good shape, and the people are spending according to their plan. The middle section is some of the private grants. And then the lower section are the revolving funds, and all of those are in good shape. No fund is in deficit. And any questions on that? And then there are no questions. The next set is the student activity accounts. So the first set is the high school, and they have $294,734 in their many sports clubs and regular clubs. And then the McCarthy is at $49,336, and then below there is their list of clubs. And Parker is at $56,369, and then there's the list of their clubs.
Okay, any questions?
Oh, looks good.
Yeah. Seems we're in good shape.
Yeah, we're in good shape. We are. And again, just for Maria's sake, so at the next meeting, you'll have kind of some recommendations on
Okay,
how to spend money and where to, kind of allocate it for the end of the fiscal year.
thank you.
Great. We have two RFPs that we issued. I'm going to ask Joanna to kind of review these for you. We had talked about this previously with the Westland School and the Community Ed program, trying to do a couple of projects because we have developed a very good account balance out of the Community Ed revolving fund. So one of the projects we looked at was a playground renovation, and the other was an HVAC project to add air conditioning to the second floor of ComEd so that they could actually do Summerfest and all of their summer programming at that site. But I'll ask Joanna to walk us through the both bids. And then there are some recommendations for you outlined in the memo for motions.
So the first one is the playground, and we put out an RFP, and the timeframe is there in February, and we had 4 companies put together a proposal. We had them in to also present it, and then the committee is recommending we go with Altiplay Parks and Playgrounds, and their proposal came in at $345,369. And this will be funded from the revolving fund, and on that one-page chart we just looked at, it was, the account number is 507, you can see that there. And we would like the playground to be completed by July 1st. And then there's a little paragraph about why we need the playground, and the one that's there was for children ages 5 to 12. And now at the Community Ed building, the children are, ages 18 months to 5, and then for most of the time. So it's going to be, and when you see the contract and that, it's a very nice design. And the staff is very excited, and everyone's very excited about moving forward with this project. So in the memo is a suggested motion, if someone would like to read it, and then it'll be a vote.
I move to accept the base bid submitted and award the contract for the reconstruction of the Westlands Playground at the Community Education Building located at 170 Dalton Road, Chelmsford, Mass. 01824 to Altiplay Parks and Playgrounds, Inc., 43 Main Street, Blackstone, Mass. 01504 in the amount of $345,369.
Second.
Okay, any questions anybody has on it? So all of this is coming out of a revolving, none of this comes out of the school budget, this is all in there, in the child care account.
Correct.
Right?
And we think they've built up a
Yeah, it looks like they have a pretty,
substantial fund to be able to pay for that.
Yeah.
all right, any other questions? Okay, do we have the roll call?
Be a roll call
Okay,
vote.
Maria?
What,
Just, here, yes or no?
oh, yes.
Donna?
Yes.
John?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0.
Thank you.
I am going to pass around, but I'll wait till we're done the other votes, contracts for you.
Sure.
Just please use the blue pen, and also to sign on your own line, no one else's line,
Why are you pointing at me? I've never.
only your own line. Thank you. Joanne?
Thank you. The second one is we went out for bid on a mini split air conditioning system at the Community Ed building. And this one, you may recall, we rebid it and I gave an update a little month ago because the bids came in so high. And now here's the final results. We rebid it in late March, and everything came in April. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder was Johnson Controls for a total bid of $109,000, with the electrical sub-bid from Mercier of $43,395, which is within the 109. And it was under the budget we had estimated to be about $150,000. And we'd like this work to be done by June 21st, so it's ready for the summer and the summer programs that community ed can have in their own building, rather than go to other sites in the district that have air conditioning. So there's a suggested motion there.
I move to accept the base bid and award a contract for the supply and installation of a mini-split ductless air conditioning system at the Community Education Building, 170 Dalton Road, Chelmsford, Mass. 01824, to Johnson Controls, 39 Salem Street, Linfield, Mass. 01940, in the amount of $109,000.
Seconds?
Second.
Seconds, okay. Any questions? Just to clarify, so the 43,395 is within the 109, so they're not
Correct.
added together. Okay. So that's, came in well bit.
This is actually a very good
What did I
price.
say? Well below.
When we went out to bid the first time, we only had one sub-bid for the electrical. I forget the dollar amount, but it was, how
Close
much?
to 90,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the sub, and only having the one sub-bidder, which then the general bidder is required to use, through the project out of whack. So this sub-bidder the price is excellent, and the 43 is part of the 109. So it's a total 109. Basically, you pay the contractor, they're gonna pay the sub-bid. But I think it's a great price. If they can hit the timeline and do this, I think it's well worth it, and it's a great value for the program. This would also come out of the revolving fund, so it would not come out of the local operating budget.
Okay.
Anything else? Maria?
Yes.
Donna?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. Wazio.
Great, and that contract will come around to you as well, and then we'll provide updates as we go.
Okay.
Great. Item number 9 on the agenda this evening is a vote to approve a net school spending agreement between the the town and the school department. We've actually had a previous agreement that expires at the end of last fiscal year, so we need to put a new agreement in place for the current year. Every town and school department are required to have a municipal agreement that talks about how certain expenses that the town pays on behalf of the school department are allocated to the schools and then reported to the state on our end of the year report, which is then audited by DESI. So there really haven't been significant changes to the document in front of you. There were a couple of percentage changes as far as allocation of how much, say, a software use percentage might be, just based on actual usage. I think Munis, we're now using about the same functionality as a town. It used to be a 60-40 split. In this agreement, it goes to a 50-50 split. But there are no significant changes to this particular document. And this is required when the auditors come in to perform their work, to make sure that the charges that the town submits to us and then we include in the end of the year report are accurate and that they actually have something to audit. So you're certainly welcome to review it. And I would recommend the school committee vote to authorize and then execute this agreement.
Motion?
Sure.
Okay. I move to approve the net school spending agreement for Massachusetts DESI end-of-year indirect cost allocation
As presented.
as presented.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay, any questions?
I've seen this before.
Now, how long is this agreement good for? You said this is, we're re-upping it.
Yeah, in talking to John and Paul and Darlene, we agreed on 3 years. So we can sit down every year if something were to change. But technically, if you vote today to do this, it'll cover us for fiscal 19, 20, and 21. So it'll cover us for 3 years. And then we'll go back and formally revisit it at that time.
Right, great. Any other questions? Maria?
Yes.
Donna?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. Wazio.
And similar to the contracts, Dennis, I'll start with you. These also need to be assigned as well. All right, great. Item number 10 this evening, at our last school committee meeting, Dan Hart, the athletic director from the high school, came forward with a proposal around adding some signage as a fundraising opportunity for the turf fields at McCarthy Middle School and also Chelmsford High School. So he went back and started to put together some of the literature that he would use to advertise to local businesses or families if they were interested in purchasing one of the signs. I attached the report that he presented at the last meeting as well. I don't intend on going through that again tonight unless there's a question. But these are just basically some of the forms that he would use. And again, just to be clear, these are kind of 3x4 signs that would be hung low on the fence that surrounds the field. Most likely, they would start at the 50-yard line and kind of work their way out, depending on how many signs they actually sold. And we do think it's a creative revenue stream to be able to bring in some additional funds to offset some of the costs of operating the fields, potentially pay down bonds or interest payments early. And I would be happy to answer any questions that the committee has, but I think it's worth trying to implement this initiative and see what type of a response we get.
Anybody have any questions on?
No, I fully support this. I think it's a great idea, so.
Yep, thank you to Dan for providing us this additional information.
I think one of the takeaways for myself too, which I think was good to go back and put this in writing, but we're really gonna have control over the messaging on the signs. So if a vendor wants to purchase a sign, they're gonna have to send us, the artwork. We're gonna be having the sign made, so we're gonna be able to kind of pre-screen everything. So if there was ever anything objectionable or offensive, it's gonna be under our discretion whether to, kind of implement or hang the sign. So I felt better seeing that as well. And there are a couple of schools in the area that currently utilize a similar advertising type fashion to bring in some revenue. So that was good to see as well. But I think our signs are gonna be very tasteful. I think, again, it'll be a nice little revenue stream, and I think it's certainly worth trying.
And is Dan gonna be marketing this?
Dan is the
I
contact.
don't wanna see the kids having to market this like a fundraiser.
No, this will be coming out of the athletic office. So this will be Dan and Angela, his assistant, doing a lot of the kind of the PR and work on this. We'll support them, but no, I don't see this being a student-driven initiative.
Good. So just one more thing, I don't know what kind of insurance policies exist in terms of the use of the fields and so on. Just revisit that in terms of this new program to make sure that everything is covered. Something falls on somebody, whatever, just consider that.
Okay.
Okay.
We certainly can look at that. These are really kind of lightweight signs that are just going to be hung on
That's fine.
the fence themselves, so close to
Just
the
because we
ground.
didn't have it before and we now have the program,
No, I
just
hear what you're saying.
to run that by.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the Chelmsford High School athletics field, turf field signage proposal.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other questions?
We do need a roll call vote.
Yes.
Nada.
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0.
You are getting very good with the motions too, I have to say.
What's that?
You're very good with the motions tonight.
Practicing. Drive my wife crazy.
Next item on the agenda this evening is a request from Student Services. I provided a memo to change one of the positions that we have currently proposing for funding in the fiscal '20 budget. We currently have 3 full-time occupational therapists employed by the district, and then 1 CODA, or a Certified Occupational Therapy Assistant. There is a request to basically convert the CODA position to a occupational therapist position. So we would end up having 4 in the district. We do have 1 individual who's currently employed by the CODA, employed as a CODA, who has completed all the program requirements to be an occupational therapist. We would certainly encourage that person to go for this position, to apply and be considered. And I think if we actually had 4 occupational therapists for really minor monetary exchange in the budget, we would have some additional flexibility in staffing. So the memo kind of outlines that for you. What we'd be looking for this evening, if you approve of this, is basically a vote to support this change so that we could begin the advertisement process and the hiring process. when Joanna and I bring a budget back to you at the end of June, after town meeting, after we make some minor tweaks to some of the contracts we've settled, we're gonna go into the budget and actually properly fund the different positions within the base budget as opposed to in the set-aside account for salary increases. It's easier to do that before we load the budget in for fiscal '20. We would note this change at that time. So you would formally have this come before you in the budget document to have the vote of approval, probably early June or the second meeting in June at the latest. So you wouldn't need to be voting on a transfer this evening. You're just voting to support the intent of the request. And also that would allow us to begin the advertising process.
I make a motion to approve the occupational therapy staffing recommendation.
Second?
Okay, any other questions, comments? And just to point out too, this is, we're not talking about a huge difference between what we're paying Dakota and the OT, and we're getting, in exchange, we're getting somebody that can also do evals.
Correct. And not have the oversight of the coder as well. Right. So no, it's approximately $1,000 difference.
I was
which is-
pretty surprised by that.
Well, it's the difference between top step to the first step of the two different salary scales. But I think it's well worth it, and it provides some good flexibility. And, yeah, leave it at that.
All right, anything else? Nope. All right,
Yay.
Brad? Yay. Donna?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. I'd like to change it up.
I'm changing it up for you here, Dennis.
Item number 10 on the agenda this evening, Amy Reese, our Director of Student Support Services, is here to provide a little update on the Student Services Office and programming. And also, we had some members of CPAC come to us earlier this winter with some recommendations. So Amy has actually incorporated some of those recommendations and our action steps into her presentation. Give us 1 second, we'll get your presentation
Oh,
up.
sorry.
And welcome you to review that with us.
Thank you. Thanks for the vote on the OT position. Sorry.
Give her the Twitter.
I want to put it on for her, though.
Oh, I don't know how to do that. Oh, the on button.
Tell her if you hit that
Okay.
button to go to the next one. Oh, I can do it.
I don't know why, but you have to hit the down button to make it go instead of the up button.
Okay. Or do I have to wait for it to load?
Yeah, what is it?
Nope, I'm not on. I thought it was on. Oh, please.
One more time.
I'm on it. Okey dokey. Here we go. Oh. Yep. Start talking. What's that golf cart?
golf cars.
Oh, I wanted the golf carts too. I don't know how that got in there.
I didn't put that there.
That would be me. I got excited over a golf cart.
No.
I was already told no, so hold on, let's just take that out.
Is that your golf cart, Linda?
I wish.
There'll be no curriculum golf cart.
I want a curriculum golf cart.
that in any budget.
Not signing up for it.
Why won't it go away? All right,
Just
everybody
hit delete.
Huh? I know, it won't go away. There we go.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, and we're back.
Perfect. All right. All right, thank you. I just wanted to start by kind of giving an overview of what student service, the Student Services Office oversees. So it's obviously special education. That's a huge component of what we do every day. It oversees school counseling, school nursing, and Section 504. Those are the 4 big areas that make up student services. Okay, so to kind of frame this presentation, we wanted to take a look at some of the areas of concern from the February presentation that the CPAC had presented to you. They had done a parent survey, got some good feedback and information, and kind of spent some time formulating some recommendations and some areas of concern to move forward with. So I've been working with them throughout this process. And basically, this slide here just kind of outlines the main areas. So from the survey, communication was one of the big areas that was made known. And I think as a whole, we are always working on communication in the district in all areas. Section 504, that process, I think a lot of parents from the survey had questions about that. I think
as a whole, that process can be a little bit more confusing than the special education process. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight and what we're going to do moving forward to kind of make that process a little bit easier for parents to understand. Transportation was another area of concern, and what I'm referring to is the specialized transportation that's outlined in students' IEPs. So there were a few concerns parents had there as well. And then the last three items were things that were left over from the year before, from the 16-17 year or the 17-18 year. They had still had some questions about the coordinated program review, which we had gone through. And then out-of-district families and how that kind of fits into our community here. And recess was another area of concern that had popped up. So starting with communication, there were two areas I looked at, and I kind of broke it into two different areas of communication. I saw areas of communication directly related to individual families and individual cases. So in other words, the communication from the Student Services Office back and forth to parents when they've either emailed or called or left messages or reached out to either the students' liaisons or the team chairs, I think was especially a part of this. And looking at how what we had kind of had in place, I had anticipated this being an area that we needed to work on as well. And one of the biggest things that's going to improve our communication with families for their individual student cases is that new position that we added into the school budget of having an additional team chair. So looking at what I had done is looked at the number of cases that each team chair was responsible for overseeing in the schools. And those cases that were at there's two elementary schools feeding a middle school and the other two elementary schools feeding a middle school, we have two team chairs. And both of those team chairs kind of oversee somewhere between 250 to 270 cases. And when I say cases, those are active students with IEPs in those buildings. And they're split across three schools. So it can be challenging, not an excuse, but challenging when they're in three different schools most of the week. And it may be in the office one day a week if there's a phone message left in the office and they might not have been in there for a couple of days or via an email to get a chance to get back. So what we took a look at is how we like the system of those two elementary schools feeding a middle school, and looking at how, if we were to add this additional team chair position, we could effectively keep that model that we had, but also look at reducing the number of caseloads. So the target of that is really to look at looking at our intensive need cases, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I moved the slide. See? Oh no, see?
Yeah, you gotta go the other way.
The other way, sorry. So looking at that, that new position is going to cover our intensive cases. So what that means is all of our autism specialized programs, so those that are at Byam, Parker, and then our life skills classrooms as well, that it's the center school program and the McCarthy program. So tailoring, having one team chair who has a background and knowledge in that area of intensive programming that can work more directly with those teachers for programming and supervision and evaluation, as well as having to have that repetitive communication with parents, because those are the cases that are so involved, and there's usually a lot of complexities that go on. So there's a lot of communication back and forth with those students in those specialized programs with the teachers and the liaisons and the team chairs. Those are the cases that typically have multiple meetings a year, not just the one annual meeting that may happen. So having that particular new position will have probably less cases on their caseload, but the cases will be more intensive, so they'll be more involved with those cases. And what that will do is it will pull those intensive programs off from the other two team chairs that will cover those three schools, and then they can focus on all of the other special education cases that are in the building. So therefore lessening the caseload in the cases that they're working on, so that there'll be more time to be able to get back to parents, communicate, set up meetings. I think another area of concern that maybe didn't come out of the survey that I've kind of noticed is being able to schedule meetings in a timely manner or around, what's convenient for parents' schedules as well, given the fact that, their cases are booked up for weeks out at a time when you need to add a meeting in, and this will help alleviate that issue as well. And then I looked at communication from a district perspective, so not so much individual communication to parents on their child's case, but looking at how we can, look at partnering and improving the communication across the district. And one of the things that we had intended from the beginning as CPAC got established was to set up regular meetings outside of the actual monthly meetings to meet with the CPAC board, so that we can kind of have some time to talk about what's going on in the district, what ideas they have, where we want to go with things, some planning purposes, sometimes having time to talk about those things outside of the regular meeting. And it was a little difficult to establish that initially with everybody's schedules, to kind of find a time either during the school day or the afternoon or evening to meet. And we finally came up with something that worked for everybody. So we started, I think there's maybe been 2 or 3 of them now, meeting the hour before the CPAC meeting to be able to have that time. And I think that moving forward is going to help as well with being able to be on the same page with district-wide communication about what's going on. And then we have partnered as well to host some workshops. As required by the regulation, the district provides for the CPAC the basic rights workshop. That will continue, and then we've done the membership of the Federation to be able to then do additional workshops as well and work together to say, what I will say is I'm going to commend the CPAC board for being able to get a lot of different presenters to come in, almost one a month, so to speak, to do different workshops for parents. It's been phenomenal. And they've been able to do that with very limited resources. We've been able to get folks to come in that really it hasn't cost to have these presenters. But then if we do find something that's of interest to parents that we want to target, and it does have a cost, we can partner together to try to figure out a way to make that happen. They've also done a really good job partnering with other CPACs in the other areas as well, so that we can combine resources to do that. And then we're going to work to plan some school-based panel discussions. I had spoken with the principal of Byam School, Mr. Cadet, and he had mentioned to me that he would be interested in helping do some of our workshops or panel discussion. And then CPAC had that idea as well, and they've reached out to him. So we're going to try to work on having some panel discussions with some school staff and use some of our resources. We have some very talented professionals here within the district as well that can kind of come out, and even if it's not presenting information in a formal way, but a question-answer type thing on a topic with specialists that work in the district to be able to answer questions in like that type of a parent forum. I went backwards, sorry. There we go. Finally, I'm working with improving the website. I think as a district, we're looking at that a bit, but looking at making it a little bit more user-friendly. I think it can be confusing. We have like a student services page, and then we have a special education page as well. But maybe having some links to go to the 3 different areas that special student services oversees, so that people can find what they want, and making sure that there are information about contacts, to who to contact, especially along the 504 area, because I think if you look on the website under student services, that's an area we can improve upon is, who to contact if you're considering a 504. So that's an ongoing an ongoing project that we're working on, and I'm hope to be able to devote some time to that this summer as well, and working with our IT staff. And then we were notified about 2 weeks ago that we were accepted in the Apple Institute, which is a planning workshop that the Federation for Children with Special Needs sponsors every single year. There's an application process, and it's a 2-day, full-day schedule of the CPAC parents and the special ed administrators working together off-site with a couple of other towns as well. I think there's 5 towns that are going. We're one of 5. And they have a whole focus to really come up with an action plan to narrow down what we want to work on, how we can collaborate better together. So I think we're excited for that. That's next week, actually, on Thursday and Friday, May 1st and 2nd. Is it 2nd and 3rd or 1st and 2nd? That
Second
Thursday.
and third.
2nd and 3rd. So that's coming up next week. And I've had the Federation come out and do components to the Apple Workshop in other places I've been, but not actually been able to send a whole team. So I think this will be exciting to be able to kind of put an action plan into place so that we map out kind of what our goals are together collaboratively moving forward. And then, as I said, the 504 process, I think, is one of, needs some updating. But basically, just to kind of remind folks what a 504 is, and that it comes under our federal law, and it talks about protecting students or individuals with disabilities, basically in any type of an organization that accepts federal funds from the Department of Education. And I just wanted to kind of outline that there is a process for Section 504, much like special education. It's not as tightened up and clear, I think, sometimes, but there is a referral process if somebody has a concern or thinks that maybe their child may need a 504 plan. There's a consent for some evaluations, and that can vary depending on what the concern is or what the disability is. There's an eligibility determination for Section 504, and then a written plan as well. And then identifications of accommodations. So basically, the difference between special education and a 504 is that specialized instruction piece. So the student would have to have a disability that substantially impacts or limits a major life function. And the major life function we'd be looking at in school would be learning. So if there's a disability that significantly impacts or substantially limits that life function. And then they look at kind of leveling that playing field by putting accommodations into place for students who need those accommodations to be able to access and learn. And then once that plan is in place, all those individuals and professionals working with the child is required to implement that plan, because I think that's something that there's sometimes confusion about whether or not those accommodations need to be implemented. And those would be accommodations that the student regularly needs on a regular basis to be able to learn. So just to kind of let folks know, is that the principal of every school is designated as the Section 504 building level coordinator. So if there was any concern about who do I contact initially, you want to contact the school principal at each school. They sometimes work with other professionals in their buildings to help with that process as well. And they can, sometimes some of the school counselors help with the process and kind of get that team going. And then if there's questions beyond the building level, my office and I am the district-wide Section 504 coordinator. So I've had parents contact me and give calls sometimes, and you can certainly call the Student Services Office if you're unsure, or your child's school. And then we'll put that information on the website, as I mentioned earlier, so that'll be a little bit easier to find. And coinciding with this, just to let folks know, the CPAC had worked to put together with the Federation Section 504 workshop. And that's one of the workshops we paired with having our membership to help fund. And so that's next Wednesday, May 1st, at the Chelmsford Public Library at the McCarthy Room. So that will be somebody coming from the Federation to do an overview of Section 504. So more questions can be answered there. So I would encourage parents to attend if they have a child on a 504 or questions or aren't sure about Section 504. And then I think, we'll have a plan to follow up again in the fall at maybe one of the CPAC meetings, have it on the agenda to kind of talk and overview that process for specific to Chelmsford with the district. And on specialized transportation, shifting to that, I think it's important to note that every child's IEP team has to consider this. Actually, transportation is considered a related service, much like occupational therapy or speech and language. And there's a component in the IEP that the team has to discuss and look at whether or not the student needs specialized transportation. There's really two components to that, and one is a little bit easier if the student's placed in a program away from their neighborhood school. So in other words, they don't have access to get on the school bus to go to the neighborhood school because they maybe belong to the center school and they need to go to the program at the Byam school. That would be a reason to provide specialized transportation for the child so that they can get to school to access the school program. The other is if the team considers and looks at the nature and the severity of the student's disability that requires them to have that specialized transportation. Perhaps they can't access getting on one of the regular transportation buses, or their disability is such that they couldn't access the transportation on the regular big school bus. So the team would then consider that, and it would be written into the student's IEP. And I think a lot of the concerns that came out of the parent survey and CPAC's concerns around that was really, what do I do if we have an issue with transportation? Who do we contact? What's the go-to? And there's really three main ways. I would encourage you to call the Student Services Office, and either Terry or Tracy or myself, will respond to that to know that there's been a problem, because we can't interact with the bus company as well to help support or rectify the issues if we're not aware of them. The other way that a lot of times after calling us, we'll say, if you go to the front main page of our school website, there's that bus icon that I put up there. It's under the quick links on the right-hand side of the website page. And if you click on that, it will bring you to a report you can fill out about a concern or a question. And that's there for not just specialized transportation, but the regular transportation as well. A lot of times we'll encourage you to document it by doing that, because the district, we get a copy of what that is filled out from that, and so does the bus company as well. And then a lot of times families work directly with the bus company, and they will call their contacts there to kind of say, my son or daughter didn't get picked up this morning, or there was an issue on the bus this morning, to let them know. And a lot of times minor things can be resolved that way. I would say if it's something a little bit more involved, you may definitely want to call the Student Service Office as well. If you want to make changes to your child's specialized transportation, those changes do have to go through our office. The bus company can't make a change, like if, say, you need your child changed to a different address. You can't just, they won't make that change without going through the office. But those are the main ways to kind of handle any issues with transportation. And to touch upon the issues that were left over from before, the coordinated program review, back in, I want to say, the 15-16 year was the self-study for the coordinated program review. And then in the 16-17 year, the DESE committee came out to the district, reviewed files, toured schools, interviewed and talked with staff, parents, administrators, paraprofessionals. And then what they did is they put together their report. That final report, I think, was shared with us in September of that year, which was 17. And then that report, the final report, is up on the Student Services webpage. And from there was a handful of items that were partially implemented. And we developed an action plan to, in a sense, correct those partially implemented areas. And there was progress reporting times that we had to do to upload what we had done to correct that action. And we would submit those to the Department of Education. And those all had to be completed 100% within a year's time, so by September of 2018. So everything was completed. There was other areas besides special ed, but I'm focusing on special ed tonight. And we did get notification, or Dr. Lang got notification that all of our progress reports were all set, and the CPR was closed from that CPR. So that one, they've since changed, I'm not going to get into it tonight, but they have since changed how the coordinated program reviews are being done, so that a little bit of everything is being done each year. So there's a different process that we will be starting for next year, but the one from before is complete. There was some things in the survey about our out-of-district families. We have a number of students that attend programs outside of Chelmsford because that's what they need for their education. And, they're in different locations, so it can be a challenge, to keep and be involved in activities here in town. A lot of times the transportation distance is something that can be challenging to be able to get back to Chelmsford if you want to participate in an after-school activity and things. It can be a challenge. Amy Mattson, the assistant director who also oversees the out-of-district cases, has had good relationships and is in constant communication with her families and meets a couple times a year, definitely once a year. Usually they will contact her to have concerns or trying to get, can we access something in music or theater or, an after-school club or something if need be. It happens very rarely. It happens, occasionally, and sometimes we can make that happen. I will say, in even my experience, having been an out-of-district coordinator for a number of years, is that a lot of times those students participate in a lot of after-school activities in the schools that they're at, because those are the kids they're going to school with, those are the peers that they're with, and, some of them have even basketball teams and things like that at those out-of-district schools, so a lot of times they'll choose to do that as well. And then I will say the CPAC has been huge in including all of our out-of-district families as well. And we have a number of them that do attend on a regular basis. And actually, we have some on our a person on our board as well. So those are kind of ways we outreach to those families. The other concern was, or the last concern I'm going to speak about, it was about recess. There was some parents that had made some note that recess had been used or at times was used taken away from their child for a given reason. And the CPAC has actually established a subcommittee on this because it's an important issue to a lot of the families. I did put in there that we do have a wellness policy that talks about, at least in K-5, that students have access to at least one daily recess period, and our elementary principals are aware of this as well. We haven't had concerns directly in the Student Services Office about this, but then again, I would expect if a parent had a concern that they would contact their child's teacher directly, or the principal of the school, or the assistant principal of the school as well, and handle it there at that level. But it's something we're looking into and talking about and having conversations about. The next two slides, I just wanted to take a minute to kind of update you as what we're doing moving ahead in student services. So we are working on 2 program evaluations this year, where we have some outside folks coming in to do some record review, observations, interviews with staff and parents. And this year, we're working this spring with the CHIPS preschool program evaluation and our elementary autism program at Byam program evaluation. So that's happening, and by the end of the school year, we're hoping to have some a report and some recommendations there that we can kind of look at to do quick things with, that we can maybe make changes with, maybe some middle range changes and long range planning to kind of help strengthen and improve our programs. The plan is that I'm going to look at doing the life skills program next year. So we'll kind of do an evaluation every year of something different. And then I'm working on this year having some program descriptions, exit and entrance criteria to our specialized programs, so that we can have that and then get that up on the website as well. With the addition of the Elementary Strive program, we kind of had worked as a committee and kind of had really worked together as administrators and then teachers at the South Row and related service providers to develop a strong, good program. And part of that was developing a mission, developing, a focus and a criteria for students in those programs. So we're going to take a look at the other programs that were already established in the district, and we didn't have that put together as strongly, and then we'll get those up as well. I talked about the life skills. I kind of went out of order there with the program eval for next year. And then I know there's been some talk about reading screenings and some of the new changes in the regulations, but that Kelly Rogers, even Dr. Hirsch, we've been talking about that, about moving forward with the district and what that looks like. Kelly Rogers, the coordinator for reading in ELL, and I are going to an overview training in July together, just on this topic as well. So that's in the works. And then, as I already mentioned, the update of the Student Services website page. That's it. Any questions?
All right, any questions?
Just a couple. With regards to communication, I think that part of the concern from parents and from CPAC was the role of the parent in a lot of the processes that happens. For example, I know that we've been trying to improve the timeliness of the communication. I also know that the law is not, they give you timelines, but they're not completely clear on how it is that you're supposed to deliver that information. So let me give you an example. If we have a team meeting notification, it could be delivered in a backpack, it could be delivered by an email, it could be delivered by mail. The law doesn't distinguish how it is that we have to do that. Do we have I know that one of the things that was coming out of the coordinated review was a procedural manual that we were supposed to put in place for our team chairs. Has that been put in place?
There's components to that that's been put in place for the team chairs and for our, it also involves our special ed teachers and liaisons because they work doing their annual reviews. The team chairs are involved in the re-evals and the initials evaluation. So there's been components of that. We have like a one-page compliant laminated document that they have for that as well. And the team chairs have been working to kind of put the other aspects for the district staff.
Okay.
It's an internal district staff manual that has kind of been revised and kind of put together.
Now, has CPAC had a chance to take a look at that at all, to
They have
provide some input?
We have not had a chance to do that yet. We've just started our planning meetings with, outside of the actual CPAC meetings.
Okay. And then, again, with regards to communication, again, I think that we're moving in the right direction in terms of responding in a timely manner. But my question is, and some of the concerns have been, is the quality of the response enough to be able to answer the questions for parents the first time around? Because some of the feedback that we're receiving is it takes multiple emails or phone calls in order to be able to get the information that they might be looking for. And it's exhausting and frustrating to have to be able to constantly chase this information. So what are we doing to help improve the quality of the response so that the parents don't have to jump through multiple hoops in order to get their questions answered?
I do think part of that will be improved upon having less cases per team chair, because I think a lot of that information has come from needing it beyond the teacher role in trying to contact the team chair, and they may respond the first time, let me look into that, because they may, where they had 3 schools, they have to go then and contact the teacher to maybe talk to the administrator of the school as well and kind of look into it a little bit. And yet then they're in meetings for that week and not necessarily back in the office to follow up within that week's time to get back to somebody. But it shouldn't take months. It shouldn't take more than, I hate to put a time frame in there of saying like a week's time or X amount of days' time. But I would hope that if they're not getting within a week or 2 information to a question or a procedure, that then they would maybe reach out at that point, shoot me an email, give me a call, or Amy Matson, in the office, or, even calling the office to say, I've been trying to get in touch with so-and-so, and we'll see if we can help circumvent and get that information quicker.
Are parents involved in the SST meetings at all yet?
SST is a regular ed initiative that doesn't totally come under student services,
Okay.
but I don't want to answer for the principals on
Okay.
that, but I know that sometimes that happens later on into that process. They're definitely in communication and aware that it's occurring,
Okay.
or they should be.
Hang on one second. I just have a few more.
Anybody else have anything while Donna's listening? I just had a question on the
Sure.
Apple Institute.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the administrative personnel and CPAC, who from the administration are going to be going to that?
I'm attending, and Amy Matson's going.
Okay.
Back to me.
You good?
So we were talking about the 504 process and the accommodations, and we have the DCAP, correct? We have a DCAP. So we're going to be reviewing that as part of this?
Okay.
No, are you?
Oh,
I should, yes.
Reviewing the
yes,
DCAP
with,
as a formal process?
Yes, as part of the 504 process, because you said that we were taking a look at that, and,
Well, the 504 process, they work together and are separate documents
Okay.
as well. I mean, the DCAPs, for those that aren't aware, are accommodations, or a list of district-wide accommodations that any student can have,
Right.
or a teacher can give and provide to any student at any given time that they need. An accommodation does not change the curriculum, it doesn't
Right.
change things, so therefore, all students could receive an accommodation here or there. The difference from that to a 504 plan would be if somebody, because of a disability, requires specific accommodations on a regular basis that need to be documented. Even if those accommodations are in the DCAP, you still want to reference them on the 504 plan if it's something they routinely need. So then, the DCAP's usually a starting place for it, and then, from there, they'll formalize it in the 504 plan. We haven't necessarily talked district-wide whether we need to review or when the last time the DCAP was reviewed. I don't think it's been since I've been here.
that
but,
might be worth having CPAC
yeah.
also take a look
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, we reviewed that as a group
Okay.
recently.
Okay.
Okay, almost done.
It's been updated.
I know that I've heard from other districts that our DCAP's pretty impressive.
With regard to recess, I know that I think that, as you had mentioned, CPAC is putting a subcommittee in place. I would like to see some resolution on this issue. I think that some of the concern from parents is that they're literally having to write into the IEPs that recess cannot be used as a punishment for their child. And it seems to me that there should be probably more open lines of communication about what's happening for kids in the classroom. And the parents are involved in that process, so that maybe, the best methods of remediating whatever the issue is what's put in place. So I'm hoping that CPAC will come up with some good recommendations that can be used district-wide and will be applied by the teachers on an individual basis with the parent input in order to be able to address the whole issue. With regards to you're going to the
Apple?
No,
No.
the one in July.
Oh,
It's
the
the screening.
A workshop. It's not specifically in the screening, but it's covering the aspects of
Okay.
that, yes.
So are we going to have anything in place for September for the incoming kindergartners for a screening?
Not necessarily. I mean, we need to find out what exactly is being required of us, how that's gonna be implemented, and, where the supports are gonna come from. It's very difficult to just go and buy, there's plenty of kits out there, you can go buy them, but if it's not the right kit, and it's not the right way to screen them, then we're kind of putting the cart before the horse.
I
No,
will
I
say.
agree, but now we're going almost right on 1 year
Yeah,
since
I
this
will,
was.
I will
yeah.
just add that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education just recently appointed, and her name escapes me, in March, I think she started to kind of work on this for the Department of Education, because they're not in a position yet quite to be able to say to districts, what exactly needs to happen statewide, because there's some components that I think districts, when I've met with my area cohort of directors, are kind of not waiting, but wanting to see what the state is gonna come out with guidelines to require. So like, as Linda was starting to say, we can move to put a number of things in place, and then the Department of Education can come out and have different requirements or guidelines on how to implement that regulation.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
completely understand that, and I appreciate that the state may not move as quickly as Chelmsford would like
Right.
them to, but
It's true.
I mean, it bothers me that
Yeah.
we're, you know, another year goes by and we have kids
Well, it's
who,
not necessarily another year. So this workshop's gonna happen in July. It doesn't take us that long to put together protocols. We just need to know what we're going to use. So let's say, for example, in July, in a perfect world, they come out and say, this is what, some of the things that need to be
Oh,
done. This is
let
gonna
me
be part of the
qualify.
regulation. Hold on a
Yes,
second.
yeah.
Then if we have to put something together, we would have plenty of time in August to put something together to then.
no, it's not gonna take you a year. That isn't what I meant. I meant that this got passed last July.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, but the
That's what I'm
requirement is
referring-
for
that's
next-
been
That's
the
something
year.
we can't control.
Exactly, but that's
Okay,
the
'cause I was
year.
gonna
I'm
say, I don't
not
think it would
talking about
take
going
us that
forward.
long. I mean,
Yeah.
No.
if tomorrow we had to put something
No,
together,
no,
we
I-
would put something together.
I'm frustrated that the state has, it's been a year,
Right.
right? And we haven't received any direction from the state on what it is that we're supposed to be doing.
That's
That's the
accurate.
frustrating part for me. So that's a year that's gone by for some.
I don't disagree with you,
Yeah.
and if anything, the state has basically been saying, go slow, because we want to decide as a state what we're gonna do.
Right.
Don't jump ahead individually as a district and do something.
Yeah, it's just frustrating.
Yeah,
No,
and
I-
one
I-
of
yeah.
the things that the other districts together are talking about, I mean, if there's something that's like there's nothing very simple, but let's just say a very cost-effective way to maybe do a cursory screening, then, you know, we can entertain that. You just don't want to be spending,
Lots of money.
$500 a kit.
Correct.
per-
No, and I
per child.
understand that.
It gets costly to find out that that's not exactly what we
And we
needed.
can't use them.
We needed to go a little bit deeper with something else. So I don't think it's one of these things that we're gonna suddenly be like, well, it's unfortunate that perhaps you would have been picked up in a screening, we're not gonna do anything. I think we just have to decide the best course of action, and until some of these sessions happen, we can't really make that decision just for Chelmsford.
No, and I understand. And the only other thing I think I wanted to say too is that, you know, I'm very, very happy that CPAC is up and running. I think that they've been a tremendous resource to parents in the community. The workshops have been unbelievable.
I agree.
Even the information presented in the monthly meetings, I think, has been fantastic. I really have to emphasize, though, as part of their recommendations, that the role of the family, the parents, be really carefully evaluated and considered in all of the things that we do as a district. I mean, that is really the purpose of CPAC, right, is to be involved in the planning and whatnot of special education services. I think that parents have a tremendous amount of information. Obviously, they know their kids best, and insight into what their child's needs may be, and I think that we have to tap into that a little bit more. I think that it benefits everybody. I think it benefits the child, I think it benefits the teacher, I think it benefits all of the students in the classroom. When we're doing what we need to for students to be able to get the help that they need. And so everybody, as I said, can benefit from that, and I think that.
And I would add that being in the trenches of seeing what's going on, that is happening more than I think is reflected. The teachers have really good relationships with
Yep.
majority of families.
Yes.
The team chairs work tirelessly with families and listen. I've sat in on team meetings. They're integral parts of the discussion in meetings. Work to help them get resources as well. So I think seeing that from the inside of watching what's going on in all the schools with their teams, I think the principals as well in each building are consistently involved in that process as well. I've been in places where that hasn't been the case.
Absolutely.
And I think that is happening, maybe not in a public way, but it really is. I'm in awe some days at how much effort that they're working collaboratively with families and the repetitive phone calls. I mean, that happen to kind of help provide resources.
And I'm glad that we're moving in that direction, and I just want to see it be able to continue. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have anything?
Well, Donna's kind of the expert, in my opinion, as opposed to me, in terms of special education, and I'm not talking for everybody else, but on the 504 plans, is there a central repository for these in the system?
A central what?
You know, does anybody know exactly how many 504 plans there are?
Yeah,
and
we have a
who
management
Who
system for that.
monitors those regularly?
Well, as I said, the principals in every building is the coordinator for Section 504, the overseer for their school. There are individuals within their team that help with that process as well. I would say at different levels, it looks a little bit differently. Most of the principals attend those meetings, maybe not so much at the high school level. And that the school counselors are actively involved in that, who are working with the student as well. One of their teachers have to attend those meetings. I mean, there is a process of kind of who's involved and who attends. And then it is written up formally and it is kept in our data management system, just like the IEPs are, only it's a different section.
Okay, so there's an actual
Yeah.
database of all the 504s that are in
Absolutely.
process and active.
And so they can roll over and when students are transitioning buildings or levels or schools, so that it's not just like passed off, but it's in the system when the rollover happens, yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned this, and teachers can see there's an icon that will indicate in next
Yeah.
to, like, so when the student's name comes up, you can see an icon that will say 504 or other things, so that
To
they
make
can click
it
right
right.
on it, yeah.
So they'll have access to, like, say, their class, and then there is something that alerts them to the fact that there is a 504 plan or an IEP, so that teacher, you know, can review it.
Will know.
And has access to it.
Okay, and I actually was sitting in the audience when CPAC presented its findings on the survey. Now, is there anything that we do as a district internally to self-audit each year? What do we do? Because they did a survey asking questions of parents and so on to determine what has gone wrong in our system or what can be improved in the system.
And what's gone right.
And what's gone
They
right.
did that
Okay,
too, yeah.
But
They-
it
yeah.
both ways. So for ourselves internally, what do we do in the special ed system to audit, so that we can always, so we don't have just a regulator coming in and
Right.
checking and seeing and making sure and giving us an action plan.
You talking
but
about
we're
like the
one step
compliance
ahead.
measures of that? Because some of that piece of, when we had to write up like corrective action components, sometimes there's components of the progress reporting where I or somebody in the office would then have to go pull random files and take a peek and make sure if it was a specific area that we had to, you know, make sure we were now in compliance with. And then kind of look at like, say, 10 random files and kind of make sure
Oh, no,
we're
when they
seeing
come
that
in and
happen.
audit, that's what they do.
Yeah, but we do that internally
You
as
do
well.
it internally, and
Yeah,
that's
to
done on a
make
regular
sure-
basis.
Yes, on a yearly basis, I would say.
Because it
And
would be nice to know that, you know, internally you self-monitor what's going on with communications and all of these things
That's
as well.
actually part of the corrective action piece, I think, on each area is different for what the corrective action needed to be. But on some of them, that was actually part of the corrective action, to randomly every quarter or twice a year, to look for a specific area.
I think if we were in a perfect world where we could have funding for every single thing, when I looked at this and I said, student support services, we actually have, you know, school nursing is under that, school counseling is under that. It is an extensive
Big area.
amount of supervision, so I guess I'm not getting a sense of how many I'll ask more. I think it's a lot tonight because this is not what the focus of tonight was. But there is a lot there, and I'm sure that it's extensive to be able to self-monitor what's going on in all of these different departments and tie it all back to special ed. My final comment is, I honestly do think CPAC has done a tremendous job. Now that I've been working with Mrs. Rogers on getting the EL Council up and running,
Oh,
which
yeah,
is a
yeah.
much
New council,
different
yes.
area than what you're dealing with in special ed. But there is interaction sometimes.
Yeah.
I can't, I followed their Facebook page and their announcements and all the things that they've been doing, and kudos to,
It's a lot of
to the work
information.
that they've been doing. And we'll probably hit up on you to put it into a second language. No, I'm only kidding. Right at this moment. But there is interaction there at some point. So it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to add, Maria, was like another example of the Student Services Office kind of evaluating their programs is like that external program review they're having this year with the ASD program at the BIAM and then the
that's a
CHIPS
good point.
program, right? So that's
Okay.
like an external group that we've hired to come in and actually like assess our programs. So then probably June, July, we'll have that report back and we'll be able to present that
Good.
back to you as another review.
So that's an internal audit.
Programmatically, it's, well, yes, internally, it's not like the DOE is requiring us to do this. It's preemptive on our side,
Right.
Kind of. Kind of looking at those programs. So that's
Okay.
good feedback too. And then, as Amy said, we're gonna get on a loop of kind of evaluating one or two of those programs
Each
every
year.
year. And just,
That's
making sure
great.
that we're doing.
I think that's
well.
extremely important to do.
Agree.
Because these are, they're regulated, they're statutory, so. Thank you.
That was a good point.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. We get two of these.
Now, if you were in one of our classrooms, we'd have to take your phone away,
I wanted entrance music, is that okay?
All right, moving along. Principal Murray and Dean Blagg are here this evening to talk about a junior job shadow day. You can leave your phone on the desk, and
Watching.
no, we're happy to have you. Just as a background information, and then they'll take it, but over the course of the year, really the last couple of years, the high school's done a lot of work to try to work with students to think about career readiness in college and beyond, life beyond high school. There was a breakfast earlier this year talking about different kind of career opportunities. This is another opportunity for kids to be able to start to think about what they might want to do long-term. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but just invite you here this evening to talk a little bit about the job shadow day that they have scheduled. And then just as a precursor again, over the summer or early fall, there'll be a more in-depth report about a longer-term program that the high school would like to do, kind of dealing with that internship, externships that we're doing. We're not really covering that this evening. This is more just to kind of highlight Job Shadow Day, get the word out there a little bit about it, and I will turn it over to Steve and Josh.
Hello, thank you for having us. First, welcome. It's great
Thank
to have
you.
you, and welcome back. It's great. So, one of the things we do very well in Chelmsford is preparing our kids academically and social emotionally. And one of the things our deans have asked is there's something we can give an experience for our kids, so when they move beyond to the next level, whether it be higher education or the job force, can we give them an opportunity where they can make a more informed decision? As there's nothing worse than when anyone's been in a job you don't like, and you, oh God, or you think you might be missing an opportunity, you hear about something. Or in school, now colleges aren't getting any cheaper, and so if you go to school and then you decide, I don't want to do this all major, you might have to go an extra semester, and that might cost some money. So are there things that we can do that can do two things? One, as I said, have kids have a more informed decision of what they're doing, and two, at the same time, bring our community together by working within our community with businesses, and I think what Dean Blagg here has investigated and looked at other schools and said there's an opportunity other schools are doing that maybe we can bring here to Chelmsford, and we started the investigation process. So we're here to kind of give you a little overview of what we've been looking at and what we're eyeing for in the future.
Great.
Josh.
Thanks for having us today. Excited to be here and embark on this new initiative. This is something that's been dabbled at, in the 20 years that I've been in the district in different ways. Long-standing, we've had career panels at the high school run by our school guidance department, and that brings in expertise from the communities and have forums for our students to learn about different occupations. And that's been great, but it's been in small groups. And one of the things that we've been working on this year is really trying to develop a comprehensive schools to careers program that we can build upon each year. This year, on March 12th, we had a career exploration breakfast for all juniors. So it was a full-scale junior class career exploration breakfast. We had over 55 different occupations and presenters come, and kids got to meet with 2 different groups. That was a precursor to what we're planning on May 21st, which is the first Junior Job Shadow Day. And really, the idea behind it is for kids to see the skills that are needed in different occupations, gauge whether or not a perceived area of interest is actually something that they can see themselves doing. By asking questions at that breakfast, they were able to hear from these professionals, but it's another thing to be able to go to that workplace, see that what goes on a daily basis, ask questions to that site mentor or that professional in their setting, see what they're doing, ask them questions, and gain a better understanding of it. And so we're excited about it because it's a bridge, right? Education today, whether you're going into community college, 4-year college, or right into the workforce, you're making pretty strong, important decisions, and there's frankly, a lot of money behind those decisions. So if you think you want to be a physical therapist and then you shadow a physical therapist for a day and realize, wow, I thought I would love this and I actually think it's horrible, that's just as valuable as, wow, this is fascinating, I can't wait to go back to school and learn about it. So that's really what we're pushing for and we're excited for. This Junior Job Shadow Day, the onus is on the kid to find their placement and to find their own to provide their own transportation to their day. We chose May 21st because it's the first day of MCAS for our sophomores, so we make our school a little quieter on that first day of the math MCAS, so thought that would be a perfect day for it. Some of the things we've done in advance, we've had assemblies for all the juniors. We've sent out a lot of information to the junior parents, and through that, and they've done some surveys through Naviance, to Do What You Are survey. Basically, it kind of taps into what are some of my areas of interest, what are some of my skills, and gives you some ideas of some potential occupations that you might be interested in. So leading up to that, kids are working with their counselors on developing resumes, and then going into it, we'll be meeting this week, hopefully, with our juniors to go over a phone script to when you're looking for a placement, calling up that placement, how you interact with the professionals, some of the questions you ask, how you introduce yourself, how you can comport yourself in a professional manner. So it's some great skills for the kids to learn. So that's really what the Job Shadow Day is. Then there's a reflection piece after, when they get back, where they kind of share what they learned, kind of a takeaway. When they're on the actual Job Shadow Day, they'll be conducting an interview of their site mentor. That's part of the experience as well. So these are all things that we think are going to be a great experience for the kids. But not only that, our greatest ambassadors at Chelmsford High School are our students. Whenever we want anything to succeed, we put our students forward, and it flies, because we just have fabulous kids and always have here in Chelmsford. So it's a great way to build relationships with, among the community, which can only help us all in the school system, right? I want to plant the seed that Dr. Lang talked about. You'll hear a little bit more about the comprehensive schools to career program. Hopefully in the summer, I can come back, or we can come back and talk about it a little bit more in depth. But the ultimate goal would be have the career breakfast, the Junior Job Shadow Day, and this junior class would be the maiden voyage of having, on a very small scale, a 6-week internship at the end of their senior year in lieu of term 4, where they would actually be doing experiential learning. So that's the ultimate goal, very small scale, and then hopefully, if it's successful, would build. This kind of program is happening in a lot of different communities. It's not widespread, but the communities that have adopted it have found great success. So we're really excited. I'm recharged by just the prospect of this program, because I think we excel in Chelmsford in a lot of different areas, but this is one area we can really, it's kind of still untapped. So we're excited by it.
We've met with other schools to go over how they've implemented, what they've done, what they've got out of it, and when we met with Westford, one of the things that they was talking about is that, especially the part about how do you do a phone call, how do you do an interview, your resume, it was immediate help for those kids going right into the workforce. It was also a great help for those in higher education as they looked for internships themselves in colleges. They already had a template of how they're going to use and move forward. So they weren't starting from scratch. They felt they had a leg up from others. So I think there was some great feedback Westford had given us about their program. And they've been doing it for
13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
So it's been
And they
wonderful.
got it from Masconomet. I just went to an assistant principal conference a couple weeks ago. Burlington High School is in their 5th year of the senior internship. So there are some good communities doing it and finding success with it, for sure. So we're not breaking ground, but it would be jumping in.
Josh, can you just talk for a second? You may have touched on this, but what is the follow-up after the day involved for the students? Because there is some type of a follow-up piece, correct?
Yep, there's a reflection piece that all students have to complete, and then a thank you letter to the site mentor. The site mentor, I keep saying that word, but that's basically whoever they're going to visit and shadow that day. They're titled a site mentor.
Is there a particular teacher that's monitoring, like the reflection piece? Is it assigned to a specific class or a homeroom or?
So it's really going to be, I guess, clarify your question? Sorry.
Sure, so, do you know what I was trying to say?
Yeah, is there someone kind of overseeing this?
Like
to
who
make
would
sure-
who is the student going to turn their information into?
So they'll be going through, we're working in conjunction with the guidance department and the guidance counselors. Tammy Leary, who's a counselor in Hawthorne House, where I'm the dean of, has been co-leading this with me and helping me trying to get this off the ground. So, and the guidance department's been very supportive of it. So.
And our Career Center, City Atchison,
Yeah.
has been doing research with that as well. So it's been a nice partnership with three different departments.
What do you do if a kid can't get an internship, or what if the kid doesn't want to go to an internship?
So that's a good question. In-house. So they're going to do something career-based that day. So we have some online modules where they'll be going through different modules, helping them investigate potential careers and skills that they need. So it's an online base, but yeah, they'd be expected to come to school. And some kids are contacting teachers in the district to try to do job shadows through the schools. So
That's good.
yeah, because some kids do want to go into education, which I love to hear.
So
We talked to, just to piggyback on that, we talked a little bit about, with our online Edgenuity, there is a whole career piece to it. Also perhaps bringing in different speakers, because, you don't want the kids online all day, I think they'd get a little bored. So to kind of break up your day, similar to what we might do like on a PD day, we have 3 different sessions. One session career piece, then speaker, and then probably an application piece. So
We'll have a better idea of numbers of kids who would be staying in-house in a few weeks. Their placements are due May 3rd, even though we're not going out to the 21st, because I work with high school kids. I know that the 3rd is a goal.
Tell them it's a firm date.
That's what they've been told, but I also have been
What about the
working on it.
liability piece? So now, we're sending the kids off and go to this job. We don't know where they're going, who they're going with.
Yeah, so.
Driving their cars there. I mean, that's
Yeah,
my biggest concern.
So we're gonna be using the CPS field trip form and medical sign-offs, and then there's a general permission form from each parent signing off on the site they're going to, and, yeah.
Similar to what we do with our early childhood development, where our kids, they go to Harrington, McCarthy, and other schools, they leave and they take their friends in their cars, same thing. Or swimming, when our kids have to go to the Y, we use the same kind of forms to make sure we're covered legally. 'Cause you're right, you don't want to be exposed to that.
Yeah.
You pick it.
Exactly. You can represent us.
Well, and I think another, one of the questions some parents have asked me is about transportation, because some kids may not be driving themselves, and whether they can get to the mentor, to the place where they're going to be on time and so on. It's your first exposure to it. It's your first time doing it, so you're going to get some feedback here.
Sure.
Of course, yeah.
And that's great. So, and I'm glad to hear you said there's been quite a bit of communication with parents so that they know what's going on. That's important too. I'll give you my personal experience because I went to your breakfast and said hello to Dean Black at the beginning.
Yep.
And was quite impressed on your parking. That was a pretty good, you really did a good job with that for all the people that came into the high school at one time. It was an excellent experience for me personally, 2 very wonderful groups, and they knew that they were going to get this next piece because 2 young ladies immediately contacted me and said, can we come and then I had to kind of get them together so that I'll have 2 people, but, you know, making sure they were okay with both coming on that same day with each other and still having a good experience. And they've been tremendous in dealing with me with it. So it's so far for me personally, as a community participant in the program, it's been very good. And I've also participated in the Westford one in the past because my office is in Westford. And I think one of the things that I found that was kind of interesting with Westford is we get to give feedback too. And that's a great thing. So I don't know if that's part of your
It is
program
part of
that you're
it, yes.
considering, but
It is.
it's really good to be able to give that feedback as well.
That would be very valuable, yeah, for sure.
It's great.
That is part of the program, yep.
What's their time frame? Like, how long do they have to stay? I can imagine a kid going in 10 minutes, hey, can you sign my form to go to the beach?
It's at least 4 hours, at least 4 hours, yeah, that's a good question.
I agree. I wish I could.
Who would do that?
High school kids do that.
Yeah.
You have to be a role model right now.
I didn't want to give anybody any ideas. So 4 hours minimum?
4 hours minimum, yep.
And when Westford came, I had to sign a form
Yes.
saying that what we did at the beginning, middle, end, and so on, so.
The information you have online is very nice with all the
Oh,
attached forms.
thank you, I probably should have mentioned that all these forms are on the website under the Career Center, so.
I've been watching over shoulder, it's
Yeah,
pretty good.
there's a lot of information there. Anyways, on the Chelmsford High School website under the Career Center.
I gave them a link so that they could get.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
That's great.
Yeah,
Good work.
so hopefully we can come back and give you a little more comprehensive presentation, but as you can tell, we're pretty excited about it, so thank you.
I do want to say, Naviance also has an excellent resume builder.
They do?
Yeah, so I know, because you have a sample resume here, but that's a great one to use as well.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming in.
All right, thank you.
Careful on the door. Sorry.
And your phone.
And your phone.
Moving on, item number 14 on the agenda. Just a copy of a org chart, which obviously can be expanded. And I think I might have a better sense tonight, Maria, after actually kind of hearing your idea about mapping and by different departments, how this can be laid out. But when the request had come in for an org chart, we happened to have this one that we had to provide for a grant recently. So just to give you a general sense of all the different players, but obviously it can be expanded and blown out to show different levels of the organization. But just to kind of give you that overarching framework of our current organizational chart, just wanted to share that with you tonight.
It's kind of what you were looking
I
for.
saw this, but, so tonight, as I was getting presentations and so on, I would refer to this to see where does this fall under. So I think you got a sense when I talked about a little bit
I
earlier.
have a better sense now after
Yes,
talking earlier.
I think you
of what
did,
you're looking
and,
for.
and so, gee, after my input from 2 meetings, you're probably gonna say, why did this woman get elected, all the work I'm asking you to do, but I'm sorry, it just makes it that much,
Yeah.
more informative when we're trying to, make decisions here, I think. And I think it's gonna be helpful for everybody in the long run.
Right. And again, this is a work in progress, it's a
Understood.
changing
And
document.
you said that, which I appreciate, thank
But at
you.
least it's a start to kind of give you that frame of where people fall.
Great,
I thought this was a great request, yeah. I mean, I saw one a while back, a few years ago, and it's just good to keep it updated. And just notice, it's on the top there, Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah, I see you.
we're the ultimate cause, and that's actually a very important thing for us to keep in mind, isn't it?
Sure. Thank you for doing it, though.
No, you're welcome. No, we had it, Linda had it already, because it was like I said, it was a response to a grant app,
Yeah,
so.
we had a grant. That
I take no credit.
Should have just taken the credit, I mean, honestly.
No, it's, oh, well, I hate the colors, so I don't want to take any credit for having to change the colors.
Item number 15 this evening is just your personnel report for the month of March. Again, not too much activity at this time of the year because our year is winding down, but it just gives you a sense of the new hires, resignations, assignment changes within the district, in case you're in the schools and you see a face and it's out of context to you. Someone may have moved from building to building. So it's just a little way to help you kind of track the comings and goings of staff in the district. So, no vote needed, it's really just for informational purposes.
Great.
Any questions? No. And last thing for me this evening is just approval of a couple of field trips and conference requests. We have the Center School fourth grade students over 2 different days, so 2 classes go one day, 2 go the other, to the Seacoast Science Center in Rye, New Hampshire. And then just our Mass Association of School Superintendents, the Summer Institute is July 8th to 11th down at the Cape. So I'll be going to that. So just for information
We gotta
purposes.
vote first.
What's the cost on that?
It's true.
Did you say what's
I
the
don't know,
cost on that?
is it 700?
For the,
The mass thing?
yeah, it's somewhere around there. It's
I
expensive.
forget if it's per day or
Yeah.
overall. It's, I want to say it's approximately 700.
All right, so do you do the motion for field trip separate, or is it all one?
You can do them separately, or you can just do it like we just do a global one if you want to as well.
I make a motion to approve the conference and field trip requests as noted.
Any seconds?
Second?
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
4-0.
Now you can go to the conference.
Oh, were you going to withhold me? Thank you.
All right, so, item 3047. Liaison report.
This is a long agenda.
This is a long agenda. Liaison reports, anybody have any?
Yeah, I have one. Last Wednesday, it was CPAC Day on the Hill, and we had Chelmsford and Westford CPACs attended. Attending for Chelmsford was Laurie McCarron, as well as Kathy Healy Norton from Westford and Alicia Curtin Mallon from Westford. And it was a great opportunity to get a tour of the State House. We met with Jim Marciero, Doreen Burgess from Tommy Golden's office, and I had a chance afterwards to meet with Emily Odgers from Tammy Govea's office. It was nice to be able to talk to them about CPAC and the role that they play in the community and in the school system. We also had a chance to talk to Representative Tucker from Salem, who's been very involved with CPAC as well. And it was a great opportunity also for Lori, Kathy, and Alicia to present the CPAC Bill of Rights, which was read, and it was excellent. So we were, so we talked about CPAC, we talked about funding, and some of the other issues related to special education. So it was excellent. And then, not a liaison duty, but worth mentioning is I attended a public forum in Lowell last night, and it was really more geared towards urban school districts related to the findings from the Foundation Budget Review Commission and how that is impacting educational funding. They did, obviously address that it's not just an urban issue, but suburban districts and rural districts are affected as well. And they encourage people to reach out to their representatives in particular and ask them to push forward the Promise Act, which would deal with various aspects of the foundation budget that have not been updated since 1993, I think it is. Yeah, so it's been a while. And it's time, so, it was, as I said, it was well attended, and it was nice to hear that there's some movement from many of the districts across the state towards really getting behind this, and hopefully we'll see some action soon. They really seemed to be pretty optimistic that something was going to happen, so.
All right, anybody else? John? I just want to mention, Maria had a good idea in addition to going over what we experienced.
Create more work for you again, Dennis.
No, if we attended a meeting, what went on in the meeting, if you know you have a meeting coming up, maybe just mentioning that, between meetings, so let's say you had a PTO meeting next week, just so people know that you're gonna be there, and if they wanna come talk to you, so I thought that was a good idea.
So I started, because I'm new to this, so I started reaching out to the entities where I'll be attending meetings, and so I'll give this as my liaison input today. I talked to Ron Anselm at Harrington, and we talked about the fact that, he got duct taped. As you said at the beginning, it took 3 hours. I don't know if you knew this, but it was 3 hours of being duct taped to the wall. And so we ended with this quote when I was speaking with him. It says, if you get a chance, this is Dr. Seuss's quote, it's the entire quote, it's wonderful, but just this part of it. If you get a chance, take it. He took it. If it changes your life, let it. And nobody said it'd be easy, they just promised it would be worth it. So there it is.
There you go.
He got duct taped to the wall.
I can't send you the pictures.
All right, anything else on liaison? Okay, any new items, action items?
Just one thing, Joanna, I want to mention, thank you very much for keeping the list of approved fundraisers updated. That's been very helpful, and it's important. Oh, is that you? Sorry.
It's a joint effort.
But no, I think it's important, I think it's important for people to remember to check that, because, there is a lot of people going around looking for, to do fundraisers and whatnot, but these are the ones that are actually sanctioned through the public schools. So I think it's a great thing, and thank you for keeping it updated, both of you.
Anybody else? I just want to remind everybody that Monday is town meeting. We need to be there. So I think town meeting officially starts at 7:30 on Monday. So if we get there a little bit early, so we can.
7:30.
Yeah, if we get there a little bit early, that'll make sure we get a spot to sit this year. And
I'll reach out to make sure they set you up a table too.
And Day on the Hill's
Oh, they
on
didn't get a
Wednesday.
table last year.
Oh, that's right, you guys were up at the
right, so but that's fine.
top table.
And yeah, Day in the Hill is Wednesday. I have heard back from most of our representatives, so they're going to try to set something up
They had to
to meet with us, hopefully collectively in a single spot. And so once I hear back from them, I'll let you know, and we can kind of maybe communicate back and forth in terms of getting there and times and all that stuff. So it's the breakfast part is not at the State House. It's across the street at
That Masonic.
the Masonic
temple
Hall.
there.
Oh, place is
Yeah.
gorgeous.
And
Been
then
in there before? Anyway, it's a
Yeah,
beautiful
but
building.
then we'll go back. We'll go across the street to the State House. All right. Anything else? Okay. We're to our second public comment section of our meeting. If anybody would like to come forward and make a comment, please give your name and address to the recording secretary.
I'll make it quick so that we can all go home and go to bed. I'm Kristen Erickson, 291 Acton Road, and I'm the co-chair of CPAC. I'm speaking for myself and Ally, who unfortunately last minute couldn't be here, and Laurie McCarron, who's here, the treasurer, secretary. I want to thank Amy and everyone for really looking at our parent survey. It was a lot of work for us to do, but I think it gave us some good information, and we appreciate feeling heard and just want to, it makes us feel that you take us seriously and that you're listening. And I also need to thank Miss Donna for all her tireless efforts for us as well. And we are really trying to, well, our first goal was just to exist, and we've done a good job, I think, of that. And then along the line with the workshops and things that we're doing, we really want to work on helping the parents in any way that we can. We do have that 504 workshop coming up. We also have a CPAC meeting this Thursday at 7 o'clock at the Learning Commons. We always have free babysitting available for those, so that's my plug for the public. That, we want to address parent topics of interest and concerns, and be a really good support network, and work with you guys and all work together. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, anybody else?
I should have thanked Amy Reese, too.
All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
That was